Half the Australian population is blood type O. So if this blood group is found at a crime scene, the chances of linking it to a suspect without corroborating evidence would be remote. And that's what detectives were facing in this case. DNA hadn't arrived, and a killer was walking around scot-free.
I arrived at the crime scene and it was very desolate. Even though it was so close to the road, it just seemed to be a long way away from anywhere. There were a number of drainways that ran under the Gateway Arterial Road, and the surface of the road was probably 15 to 20 metres above these drains. So you could hear vehicles going across up top, but you couldn't see them, and they couldn't see you either.
The body was located on its back on a concrete apron near one of those set of drains and was in a naked condition. There were 4 stab wounds to her upper chest and upper abdomen area.
The wounds were relatively close together. They appeared to have been done in a frenzy, and they were very concise.
And on the evidence that I saw in situ that night, the target of those 4 stab wounds was her heart.
Another wound was a bruise to the forehead. It would appear that she was either concussed or unconscious at some stage, and she had some dirt and discoloration and drag marks on her body. And they corresponded to drag marks on the apron, which had dirt on it.
We had linear marks there that were absolutely consistent with the body being dragged without fighting. And there was no blood associated with the drag marks as I would have expected had she suffered any of those stab wounds down on the grassed soil area. So the evidence at the scene pointed to me that a sexual assault, perhaps a rape, had occurred at a location in the grassy soil area. The victim had then been dragged on her front up the apron a short distance and very efficiently killed by one or more of the stab wounds through her breast area.
The female had her hair put into a spike fashion, something like a Gothic style. She had makeup on, her eyes were a little darker than they possibly should have been, so it would appear that she'd been dressed up to go out somewhere.
There was no handbag, purse or clothes in sight to help them know who the young girl was. As her body was taken to the morgue, Mike McKay received a call.
We were contacted by the Wynnum Police, who advised us that a young girl by the name of Janet Phillips had been reported missing.
15-year-old Janet Phillips had been to a party the night before her body was found.
It was a friend's 21st, and we all went out as a family. Janet was in a very happy mood. She spent all afternoon doing herself up, and she looked absolutely beautiful. We took a photo of her. The next morning, I got up to see if Janet was home, and she wasn't. And I got very worried. It was very unusual. Janet always rang me. That was the rules. And I knew in my own heart that something happened to her.
Police have released the name of a 15-year-old girl whose naked body was found in a drain in the Brisbane Bayside suburb of Mansfield yesterday.
15-year-old Jeanette Phillips of the eastern suburb of Lotta had been repeatedly stabbed. The schoolgirl was last seen at a barbecue she'd attended with her parents in the nearby suburb of Wynnum.
We interviewed all the people who attended the party on the night of the 18th of July, and that included both male and female persons, with a view to trying to identify if any of those persons was responsible for the murder of Janet.
Janet was having a good time at the party. She was quite happy. She wasn't drinking. She was only drinking Coca-Cola.
I left, and I got home at 11 o'clock. I asked her, did she want to come home? And she said no, she'll stay with her father.
At about 11:30, there was a fight that broke out involving Janet's father and two male persons who gate crashed the party.
Janet became upset and was quite taken back with the violence, and shortly after walked away from the party in a distressed state.
Within hours, Janet was dead. Unbeknownst to her killer, he had left behind a vital clue to his identity.
If you can imagine a pure angel, you got it.
Bob Turner describing his young niece, an innocent 15-year-old stabbed to death just off the Gateway Arterial Road early yesterday. 2 young boys found her naked body in a storm drain just on dark. Police are withholding the results of a post-mortem which will determine if she was also sexually assaulted.
2 of the wounds had penetrated the heart. One of them had passed right through the heart, one side through to the other, suggesting to me that the blade would have been somewhere between 11 and 14 centimetres in length, and that its width closest to the handle, that junction, appeared to have been up to 2 centimetres. So something like a fishing knife.
As Janet had been rendered unconscious by a severe blow to her head, she had no chance to fight back. No hairs or fibres from the offender were found, but he had left behind his sperm. Janet had been raped.
She wasn't a girl that went out running around or playing up or anything like that. Her parents were very strict with her, and, it just shouldn't happen to that sort of girl.
The next day we revisited the crime scene with the benefit of daylight, and we began another search of the immediate area. Number of earrings and buttons were located near where Janet's body was, and these were later identified as being Janet's jewellery and buttons from the shirt that she was wearing.
But the shoes, skirt and white blouse she wore to the party were nowhere to be found.
There were 3 partial foot impressions on the concrete apron, and one of those actually extended into the still wet soil area at the bottom end of the apron. There was a distinct pattern, a little spherical ball-type pattern, evident in that sole pattern.
We also discovered a set of partial tyre prints.
Those prints were just off the side of the road, an easy spot for a car to pull into and park. Impressions were taken of them as police believed Janet had been abducted and driven to the spot, a 15-minute drive away from the party.
Janet was last seen alive about 1 o'clock yesterday morning at this Wynnum Hall, where she was attending a 21st birthday party with her parents. She apparently had an argument with someone and decided to leave by herself. Upset, Janet began the 2-kilometre walk home from the Catholic Hall without her parents knowing. Somewhere along the way, she met her murderer. Police have appealed to anyone with information to come forward.
Our investigations in regard to the party centred around all the males who attended that party. There was an instance where Janet was seen arguing with a young male person at the hall.
A description was given to us of what this man looked like, and he was a suspect.
But the young man in the blue shirt was not the only male person of interest that night.
There were a number of people who attended the party who we knew had criminal convictions for matters of assault and drug abuse and sexual activities. And because of that, these people were suspects, and we had to conduct inquiries to try and establish whether those persons had any responsibility in the death of Janet.
Some of the stories they gave us, they told us some untruths. It was found that some of them would give us a version as to how they went home and what time they got home, and on investigation, we would find that that wasn't correct. The gate crashes at the party may have had a motive in that Janet's father did eject them from the party and caused them some grief.
Police knew that Janet had left the party soon after this altercation. And now members of the public were helping them fill in Janet's movements from that time.
A number of sightings of Janet on that night were made. One was sitting on a bus seat outside a pharmacy in the main street, and another one where she was sitting in the gutter near a roundabout at Wynnum in a distressed state. And that a blue Commodore had gone around the roundabout and appeared to be going back towards Janet. But further investigation couldn't conclude whether that was Janet or not.
She was last seen alive about 12:30 a.m. outside this Wynnum chemist just across the road from the party. Her shoes, some jewellery and the buttons torn from her shirt have been recovered, but her clothing and the murder weapon are still missing.
Someone had found a pair of shoes at the rear of shops close to the hall where Janet was last seen. They were identified as being Janet's. It opened up the investigation because it could have been the murderer. He may have found her there, he may have followed her there, or she may have left the shoes there at some stage.
Then there was another sighting of Janet.
A young girl who was coming home late from a date with her boyfriend. It was probably about 12:10. She looked across the road and she saw who she believed to be Janet, dressed in the white top and the black skirt, with her shoes off and walking down Chestnut Street, and she was seen to turn right into the Esplanade.
The Esplanade was in the total opposite direction to where Janet lived. If this was indeed the 15-year-old, had her decision to go this way taken her along a path to the killer?
Police do a good job in their crime fighting and whatnot else. Let's see if they can clean this one up in a hurry. Because by Christ, there's a few of us who like to get hold of them that done it.
Janet's uncle Bob last Monday, desperate for an early arrest over his niece's brutal murder. 72 hours later, and police admit they're no closer to her killer.
We were very hopeful that the evidence that was located could lead to identifying the suspect for Janet's murder.
But the tyre print was found to be unidentifiable because it was only a partial tyre print. And the sand shoe was found to be a common athletic type of sand shoe, and thousands of pairs had been imported into Queensland.
So that made the investigation very difficult and frustrating.
A thorough search of several ponds near the murder scene today has turned up nothing. Her clothing and the murder weapon are still missing.
A large number of knives were handed in, which were found embedded in trees, found on the side of the road, left down in the foreshore. So each time this happened, we needed to conduct an investigation into the origin of that knife and whether that knife may or may not have been used in the murder of Janet. None of the knives fitted the identifiable features of the knife that was probably used to murder Janet.
One thing was certain. Her killer was male.
Tests were conducted on the semen, which identified that the person who had deposited the semen was a O blood type.
While DNA wasn't available in 1987 to know with certainty who raped and likely murdered Janet, knowing the blood groups of the men detectives suspected would help them narrow down the field.
We asked the males who were out and about that night if they were prepared to volunteer either blood or saliva, and between a third and a quarter of those males that we tested had similar blood groupings to the semen. This meant that we could particularly look at their alibis, particularly look at their statements, and investigate them with a view to either exonerating them or finding them culpable in some way.
And there was always the chance that Janet's killer was a stranger. Something that the scientific officer had considered on the night Janet's body was found.
It appeared to me that the offender in this case was unconcerned about the location of the body. It was located under a bridge on a major arterial motorway. Somebody, probably more sooner than later, is going to happen upon it. And so the offender was unconcerned about that person, that victim being identified. And one explanation for that is there was no connection between the offender and the victim. They were not known to each other.
During the inquiry, we also concentrated on people who had recently been released from prison, and one of those persons was Lloyd Clark Fletcher. Lloyd Fletcher had been previously convicted of the rape and attempted murder of a young woman in the Innisfail area.
A 19-year-old female was on her way home from a dance in Innisfail and was accosted by Fletcher and dragged to the Johnston River and then proceeded to knock this poor girl unconscious. He assaulted her and raped her. He's then tied her bra strap around her throat so tight that she could not breathe. And whilst unconscious, he threw her into the river. By the grace of God, she came to in the Johnston River and crawled out the other side and found help. And Lloyd was subsequently arrested. Lloyd Fletcher was imprisoned for 10 years as a result of his Innisfail offences, and he was released 3 months prior to Janet being murdered. We did look at any similarities between the Innisfail offences and Janet's offences. A knife was used. Both appeared to have been abducted late at night. There was a fair amount of violence. There was a rape, and also that the clothes were violently ripped from the torso of the girls. We went to his home where he resided with his parents. We asked him if he had come to Wynnum. We asked him if he had sex with a female that night. And we asked if he had travelled on the Gateway Arterial Road that night, and he said that he didn't. We asked him if he had knowledge of Janet Phillips and whether he in fact was party to her murder. He denied this, but he was prepared to come to the police station with us in order for us to ask him further questions, and we allowed his father to come to be with him at this time. He told us that at about 7:30 on that Saturday night that he went to the train station and caught a train into Brisbane. At the time he said he was wearing quite striking cowboy clothes, cowboy hat, cowboy jeans and riding boots.
He stated that he had actually attended the Lennon's Hotel in the city, and then from there that he had hitched a ride at about 11:30 at night in a vehicle which could have been about a HD Holden.
He could offer us no further information as to who that person was or where that person lived or the further identification of the motor vehicle. He said that he returned home about 11:30, and this was corroborated by his parents. We subsequently typed up a statement, but he declined to sign it.
But he was more than willing to volunteer a blood sample.
Forensic tests done on Lloyd Fletcher's blood showed that he was in the right blood group, the same blood group as the semen.
Lloyd Clark Fletcher had just been released from jail for rape and attempted murder. Like 20 other men, he volunteered his blood in the investigation of Janet Phillips' murder. They were all blood type O, the same blood group as the semen found in Janet's body.
We spoke to the people that were ejected from the party. They gave us statements and they supplied us with alibis, which checked out.
The alibis of other men from the party were also checking out, but Lloyd Fletcher's story was being questioned.
He told us that he'd gone into town to a hotel in this cowboy gear. You know, he had really bright cowboy gear. We went into Lennon's and said, look, any bright cowboys? They said no. It just didn't gel. None of those persons could identify or remember a person fitting that description or wearing those clothes. We couldn't find the fellow who drove him home, and his parents were his alibi at this time.
Today, this scene is peaceful. There's little to show a brutal murder happened here almost a fortnight ago. Despite 20 detectives working around the clock, Janet Phillips' killer has not been found. But it's believed locals may be involved. Police also want more information on a number of cars sighted in the area during the early hours of the July Sunday morning.
It was decided that we erect a sign at the side of the road in order that it prompt someone who might know something of the crime or the criminal.
We received information from members of the public in respect to vehicles being parked on the side of the road and in the vicinity of where Janet's body was located.
We had confirmation of sightings of a Datsun 180B motley colour on the side of the road, right at the murder scene, in fact, right above the murder scene, earlier in the night or earlier in the morning. And then subsequently, probably an hour and a half later, we had more confirmed sightings of a similar vehicle parked on the other side of the road. It quite sparked our interest because the 180B that had been seen at the scene wasn't dissimilar to a vehicle that was owned by Lloyd Fletcher.
The detectives remembered seeing it when they had first visited Fletcher. He had told them at the time that he didn't take his car out that Saturday night, preferring the train and hitchhiking.
We took possession of Lloyd's car and had it forensically examined.
We were actually searching for any hair or any fibres that may have been transferred from the clothing that Janet wore.
But there was no evidence that we got from the car that would assist us in the investigation.
Lloyd Fletcher was free of a murder charge, but not the police gaze. As a result of some traffic offences, Fletcher found himself back in jail for breaching his parole, but he was out in time for the inquest into Janet's death.
On the 19th of July last year, the naked body of Janet Phillips was found near a drain beside the Gateway Arterial Road at Mansfield. A pathologist told the court today she suffered injuries consistent with having been knocked unconscious, dragged several metres to the drain and then stabbed 4 times with a knife. Investigating officer Detective Sergeant McKay told the court of exhaustive investigations which came to nothing.
At the conclusion of that inquest, the coroner made an open finding without identifying the person or persons who were responsible for her death.
Janet's murder became one of the cold case files, but it wasn't forgotten, nor was their prime suspect. 2 years on from her death, 31-year-old Fletcher was back in front of the police, but this time in another state.
I had been at a girlfriend's house visiting, and I'd left there about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I jumped on my push bike with my backpack and was riding towards home.
Get off the bike! Get off!
I remember everything was in slow motion. I remember turning around and seeing him basically right behind me chasing me. I was terrified, and I fell over. He picked me up off the ground. I was bleeding and I knew that he was going to do something bad to me. And traffic started passing us. So he put one arm around me and he had the other arm with a knife at my back. I thought he was going to kill me. I need to do something here to try and save myself. If I don't say something now to someone, I'm going to be killed. A car pulled up and the gentleman put his window down and said, "You know, you're right." And I turned around while both the lady and the man in the car were looking at me and mimed help. That's when the woman basically jumped up out of her seat and said, "Oh my God, this girl's been raped." And they jumped out of the car and came to my aid. And then other people who were driving past had stopped and they all chased him. He got caught in the blackberry bushes, and that's when the police came and apprehended him. I always said he had, like, evil eyes. Yeah. Just he looked like a nasty, nasty man.
There appeared to be a continuation of his modus operandi. He's pulled them from the side of roadways, he's used a knife and he's used violence to incapacitate them.
Mike McKay immediately headed to Victoria. He had just taken a statement from Fletcher's father, who told him that his son had lied to them. Fletcher had taken his car out on the night Janet Phillips died, and he came home after the time he claimed.
We were probably hoping that by telling him that Dad had told us the truth, that he may have been prepared to tell us a little bit more of the truth. But in his words, he told us to piss off, that he didn't want anything to do with us.
Lloyd Clark Fletcher was charged and sentenced to 5 years for the kidnapping of 13-year-old Debbie. While he was behind bars, a little-known forensic tool had come into existence: DNA.
When Janet was murdered, it wasn't a science, and probably 5 to 6 years after Janet's death, it was in the infancy of a science. And I did contact the health department in order for blood tests to be run in relation to the DNA so that we could possibly identify Lloyd Fletcher as being the person responsible.
But the test came back negative. Lloyd Clark Fletcher had been eliminated as a suspect.
I was gobsmacked. I honestly believe that Lloyd Fletcher was responsible for this murder, and it was just hard to believe, but it was sort of like, it was like getting second prize in the lotto. It was gut-wrenching.
We need the police quickly! Shut up! Mate, this is Wynnum train station. A girl has been raped and bashed down at Wynnum train station. I'm not joking around. I need an ambulance at Wynnum train station immediately.
It had been nearly 10 years since Janet Phillips disappeared from a party in the suburb of Wynnum and was murdered. Now another young girl had been attacked in the same area.
She was sitting on the platform by herself. She said she saw the vehicle turn up in the car park, saw a gentleman walking across the overhead walkway, but took no more notice, turned herself away from that direction and continued to read her book.
The guy came up behind me, put his hand over my face, put a knife at my neck and dragged me off.
And she was dragged across the overhead walkway of the railway station from where she was seated at knife point and taken to a black sedan.
He started bashing me, punching me in the face and choking me.
Very fortunately for her, 4 young local teenagers happened along at that very time to the car park and heard her screaming and went across to investigate, and she managed to scramble out. The person who was trying to abduct her at the time jumped into his driver's seat and with the spinning of the tyres took off in his car. One of the kids actually threw a rock which smashed the driver's side front window. That left glass fragments on the car park asphalt. Scenes of crime people collected the glass, took some photographs, the usual things around the scene.
The young woman involved had been badly bashed. She'd suffered very severe facial injuries.
I think I was unconscious for about 10 minutes. When I came to, there was rope tied around my wrists and there were rope burns on my ankles. All that was going through my mind was that I was going to end up a body found washed up on the pier.
We spoke to Anna and also the 4 juveniles who were actually our witnesses and took what's called a confit from everybody. The general description was of a male of average size with dark to possibly greying hair with a beard. The sedan was a dark colour, possibly a Nissan, according to the witnesses.
In a sickening attack at Wynnum Station, a 16-year-old girl was abducted and assaulted at knife point. Thankfully, she escaped.
We actually gave it a fairly extensive media exposure, which was the best tool we could have used because I received an anonymous call. She said, I believe the person who attacked that young girl was Lloyd Fletcher. And as soon as she said Lloyd Fletcher, the penny just dropped for me because I knew that he was involved in a 1977 matter up in North Queensland. Was a person of interest in the Janet Phillips murder and had been charged with a matter down in Victoria in relation to the abduction of a young girl down there.
Lloyd Fletcher had been released from the Victorian jail after 3 years of his 5-year sentence. Now 4 years on, police found him at his parents' place.
Lloyd Clark Fletcher walked out onto the veranda where we were and he put me back a step when he said, I thought you'd be here. I expected you here. And I said, why? And he said, well, this is the sort of thing you think I do. He told us that he had been to a nightclub in town and drank by himself, bourbons, cokes, didn't talk to anybody. Disturbingly similar to the story he gave police in 1987. He allowed us to take possession of his Nissan motor vehicle. It was an awful black colour and the interior was black. I certainly wouldn't drive it, that's for sure. You know, it's not something you'd want to be picking up a new girlfriend in, that's for sure. Black, all black and black everywhere, just black, black, black.
The dark colour and make of the car was similar to what the witnesses had seen at the railway station. However, Lloyd Fletcher's car had no broken window.
The lady who had rang up the night before had rung again. She was in fact a niece of Lloyd Fletcher. He phoned her in the early hours of the Sunday morning and said that I need to come over. And he turned up there and he had blood on his clothing and a smashed window in his car. And he gave us some story about getting involved in a fight and somebody throwing something at his car and smashing the window. According to her, he'd then taken the seat covers off his car. He'd driven away saying he's going to replace this window.
Before leaving, he threw his bloodied clothes into the washer and used his niece's vacuum cleaner in the car.
I suspect that he gave us his vehicle because he was confident in as much as he'd cleaned the vehicle, confident in as much as he'd changed the glass, and confident to the fact that we wouldn't find anything incriminating in the vehicle.
The vacuum cleaner was immediately seized. Inside, they found numerous glass fragments.
I also examined the outside of the premises and located a number of glass fragments that were situated on the front yard and also in the gutter.
The first task was to prove that Fletcher had, in fact, installed a new window. He had told police that none of his panels or windows had ever been replaced.
When the glass is put into the vehicle at the time of manufacture, the glass is impregnated with a code. The driver's side window was date-coded differently to the other windows of the vehicle. This led me to believe that the glass window had been replaced on the driver's side door.
Fletcher had lied, and there was further encouraging evidence.
As a result of that information, I removed the driver's side door trim, and on removing that, I noticed that there were some glass fragments at the base of the door frame.
Forensic investigators now needed to prove that the glass found in the car at his niece's place and the glass found here in the car park at the railway station were one and the same.
We looked at the refractive index, the thickness, the colour, the fracture pattern, and the moulded edge. We were able to conclude that the glass from the crime scene is consistent with the glass from the window.
So Fletcher's car was the one in the car park on the night Anna was attacked. And there was more conclusive evidence inside the vehicle.
Obviously, the owner had gone to great lengths to clean the car up, but there were traces of blood that remained behind, and we were able to subsequently test those stains, and the DNA profile matched that of the victim.
Police returned to Fletcher's parents' place with a warrant for his arrest, but he was nowhere to be found.
We were frightened that if we didn't get him quickly, he might strike again with fatal results.
When 16-year-old Anna was rescued after an attempted abduction at a railway station, an anonymous caller and glass fragments left at the scene led police to Lloyd Clark Fletcher. Police had been searching for him for the last 24 hours.
We got another tip-off from an anonymous person, and he was located the next day waiting for a train at the Sandgate railway station.
When we arrived at the railway station, he seemed resigned to the fact that we were there. He wasn't overly surprised. He got in the car with us, went back to the Wynnum police station. The complainant made a complaint to this 16-year-old girl that said that she was sitting alone at Wynnum railway station, and she alleges that a male person has come up on her from behind and has taken her to a vehicle by force and has assaulted her in that vehicle. You understand what I'm investigating there? Yeah. Okay. Is there anything you can tell me about that particular matter?
The only thing I'm willing to say is yes, I did.
Beg your pardon?
The only thing I'm willing to say is yes, I did.
The complainant has suffered injuries to her face. Would you have any idea how those injuries may have come about?
Yeah, I assaulted her.
Can you tell me how you assaulted her?
Punched her.
The young lady made an allegation that the male person put his hands around her throat and rendered her unconscious by choking her. Do you have any recollection of that?
No.
None?
None at all.
When found, the girl had a piece of rope tied to her wrist. Did you know how that piece of rope would have got to her wrist? Well, have you any recollection of the rope?
No.
Lloyd, how do you remember you did it? How do you know you did it if there's a few incidents there that you can't remember?
Well, you guys are telling me you've got evidence against me.
Well, we're telling you, obviously, certain things, but we asked you what you remember of that day and that evening.
Yeah, all I can remember is going to Hoagie's.
Yeah.
And drinking.
Yeah.
And driving into Wynnum.
Yeah. Right.
He claimed to be suffering from blackouts.
All right, you can describe the girl for me?
No.
You know what colour skin she had?
No.
I didn't believe one word of the blackout, certainly not. Just told us enough to say, right, yes, it was me, but without giving away too many home secrets, I think, that's all.
There's an allegation a knife was used. That's all I would put to you, okay?
No, well, I don't own a knife of any sort except a fishing knife, which is this big, and which is in my fishing bag at home.
39-year-old Lloyd Fletcher was charged with Anna's assault.
I wasn't surprised that Lloyd had reoffended, and there was a satisfaction knowing that he'd been captured, and it was also a bit of an adrenaline rush in that it gave us another opportunity to speak to him about Janet.
Mike McKay always believed Fletcher had killed Janet Phillips. While an early DNA profile had ruled him out, McKay asked that Fletcher's blood, which had just been taken, be compared again to the semen kept in cold storage from Janet's case.
Came back as a positive match. They said, yeah, there's 1 in 4.9 million possibility. We said, well, what about the first time? When I'd previously asked for Lloyd's blood to be checked against the semen at the John Tong Centre, it would appear that they've pulled the wrong blood, which gave us the negative reading. We were required to go and inform him of the DNA implications. We set up an interview room at the prison, and he came into the room, and I asked if I could interview him in relation to Janet, and he immediately again told us to piss off.
He refused point blank to talk to myself and Michael, and wanted nothing to do with us.
They apparently had spoken to him on a number of occasions, and he didn't like them at all.
He agreed to be interviewed by Peter Scanlon.
The scientists compared specimens of your blood. You know, the results show that the spermatosa in Janet Phillips matches yourself. Can you offer us any explanation why a qualified scientist would make those findings?
No, you're saying that. That's what he's come up with. I disagree.
On that night, as far as you can recall, you never went to Wynnum. You went on the Gateway Arterial Road, and you definitely don't know this Janet Phillips.
No.
Did you have sex with any girls over that weekend?
I never went out with anybody that night.
And you didn't kill her?
No.
As a result of that final penultimate interview, we came to the conclusion that Lloyd Clark Fletcher should be charged with murdering Janet Phillips.
The charged man, a 39-year-old former labourer, was escorted by police to Wynnum Court this morning to hear charges of murder. It's alleged that in July 1987, Lloyd Clark Fletcher abducted, raped and stabbed to death 15-year-old Janet Phillips.
We don't give up, we don't forget, and at times we have successes.
I couldn't believe it. It was him after all this time, 12 years down the track.
He's pleaded not guilty. Prosecutor Paul Rutledge told the court, in raping Janet Phillips, her attacker left his mark.
But 10 years before, that calling card could not be decoded. Lloyd Clark Fletcher had raped, murdered, and left Janet Phillips in the place he had taken her, thinking he was safe.
And at that point in time, he was safe, because no one had seen him attack her. No one had seen him take her out of the car. And as far as he was concerned, he hadn't left any traces there which could pinpoint him as being the attacker. But this was before DNA.
Lloyd Clark Fletcher is a depraved and sadistic predator of the worst kind. Last night, a Brisbane Supreme Court jury found him guilty of the rape and murder of 15-year-old schoolgirl Janet Phillips. He was sentenced to life in prison.
The prosecution, however, didn't feel a life sentence was enough for Fletcher. That meant that he would be eligible for parole. So, when sentencing for Anna's assault came up, Paul Rutledge put forward his case.
I then presented to the court the circumstances not only of the attack on Anna, but also the circumstances, the disturbing circumstances in relation to his attack on a number of other females. Fletcher's history is one of extreme violence. One has a picture of a male who goes out hunting for females, a clear intent to kill. Clearly the type of person that required an indefinite sentence. He clearly represents a danger to the community.
A Supreme Court judge put an end to Fletcher's long and horrific criminal history, giving him an indefinite sentence. That means he'll die in jail.
Lloyd Clark Fletcher is finally paying for crimes he committed over a 20-year period. But given his history, police are not convinced that they have heard the last of him.
We say in the police that you never get caught for all the crimes, and I honestly believe that he would be responsible for other serious crimes, but unfortunately, we haven't got the evidence.
With all my experience, I probably tend to think that there are things that we need to talk to him about that he hasn't told us about.
And I think that if he's ever released, he'll re-offend. I do believe that he's in the best place, and I only thank God for the improvements in science and, of course, the DNA.
One phone call, 3 missing minutes, and a city that still has no answers. They call it the Tokyo 1990 Cold Case Solved, a victory headline stamped on an investigation that never truly ended, a label meant to calm a restless public, to close a file that kept bleeding questions into the years. But behind that neat phrase lies a story of one young woman, a corridor washed in neon, an elevator security camera, and a disappearance that still sends a chill down the spine of anyone who dares to look at the footage in the dark. This is not a legend. This is a police file, a timeline, a crime that sliced through the heart of a city that believed it had seen it all. Tokyo, winter of 1990. The bubble economy is still breathing, if a little heavily. Neon signs burn late into the night over Shinjuku, Shibuya, Ikebukuro, as if the city refuses to fall asleep. The streets shine with wet asphalt and taxi headlights, a river of umbrellas and briefcases moving in tight lines. Somewhere above that maze of light, on the 12th floor of a modest apartment block in a quiet side street of Nakano, a small one-room unit glows behind a thin curtain. In that room lives a 24-year-old office worker named Aki Tanabe, the kind of person crime statistics like to call ordinary, the kind of name the city would never have remembered if she had come home safely that night. She leaves the office at 8:42 p.m., captured by a grainy lobby camera in a beige building in Shinjuku. Brown coat, dark skirt, hair tied back, a simple leather bag over her shoulder. The footage is time-stamped, crisp, dull, the way daily life looks when you slow it down. She nods to a colleague at the reception desk. She does not know this is the last time anyone will see her clearly. 2 minutes later, she appears again, this time on the camera facing the street. She opens her umbrella, steps into the drizzle, disappears behind a passing bus. No argument, no stranger, no chase. Just a young woman stepping into the Tokyo night, one more face swallowed by the crowd. The commute is routine, the kind of route you can walk blindfolded. Subways, transfers, a vending machine, coffee between trains. The police will later map her path with cold precision. Ticket gate entry at Shinjuku Station at 8:50 p.m., recorded by the magnetic card reader. Exit at Nakano Station at 9:06 p.m. She buys nothing from the kiosks. She makes no calls from the public phones. She is a ghost moving on rails, visible only where machines bother to remember her. Outside Nakano Station, the cameras are fewer, older, pointed at entrances and cash registers, not at the dark sidewalk where she walks alone with her umbrella, one small figure under the elevated tracks. The last confirmed sighting comes from a convenience store 2 blocks from her apartment at 9:14 p.m. The security tape, later copied and replayed until the colors bleed, shows her stepping in, folding her umbrella, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. She buys a bottle of green tea, a pack of onigiri, and a cheap instant curry, the kind you heat up in hot water. Dinner for one, nothing special. At the register, she smiles politely, says arigato, slips the receipt into her bag. The cashier, a 19-year-old student working the late shift, will later insist there was nothing strange. No one followed her inside, no one stared, no one waited by the door. A clock above the counter marks the time, 21:15. The walk from that convenience store to her apartment building takes 3 minutes on a normal day. One left turn, one pedestrian crossing, one narrow alley lined with bicycles chained to metal poles. Neighbors will describe the area as safe, quiet, boring even. A place where cats own the rooftops and the loudest sound at night is the clatter of glass bottles and recycling crates. But somewhere in that short walk between the automatic doors of the store and the lobby of her building, the line of her life is cut clean. She never arrives at her apartment. The elevator camera never captures her stepping in. The door sensor of her unit never registers her key. At 10:37 p.m., her phone rings in the darkness of her empty room. It is her younger sister calling to ask if she will come home that weekend. If she will bring that cheesecake from Shinjuku she promised. No one answers. The phone rings out, once, twice, 10 times, then falls silent. The sister thinks nothing of it. Late nights are normal. Work is hectic. Trains are crowded. Tokyo swallows time whole. The next morning, her boss calls the apartment landline when she does not show up for work. Again, no answer. By afternoon, her parents have tried every number they know. By night, the silence has turned from annoying to wrong, from wrong to terrifying. The missing persons report is filed just before midnight at a small neighborhood police box, a koban lit by a harsh fluorescent tube. The officer on duty, a middle-aged sergeant, writes down the details in neat characters. Name, Aki Tanabe, age 24. Last seen, convenience store near Nakano Station, approximately 9:15 p.m., January 12, 1990. Clothing, brown coat, dark skirt, black pumps. He has heard this pattern before, too many times. Young woman, night, no witnesses. Tokyo is big, he thinks. People disappear for a night. They come back. Arguments, secret boyfriends, sudden trips. He stamps the form, promises to forward it, but his voice carries that slight hesitation, that tiny distance between procedure and urgency. The next day changes everything. Her apartment manager opens the door with a spare key in the presence of police. The room is untouched, bed neatly made, window locked from the inside, plants on the balcony still damp from the last watering. On the low kitchen table lies a stack of magazines, an open planner, a pen with its cap off, frozen in midweek. In the tiny fridge, milk is half full, well within its expiry date. Her work clothes for the next morning are hanging on the back of a chair. There is no suitcase missing, no sign of a rushed decision to leave. Whatever took her away from that sidewalk did not come from inside this room. It came from the outside, fast and without warning. Soon, the neighborhood realizes this is not one of those quiet, shameful disappearances that families whisper about and then bury. Posters go up around the station. Her photo, taken at a company outing, smiling in the weak sunlight of a park. Black hair, shoulder length, round face, clear eyes. The word missing in bold Japanese characters above her, followed by the date, the time, the plea for information. The convenience store clerk recognizes her immediately and calls the number. Police come. They take the tape. They take his statement. He repeats the same line again and again. She was alone. Nothing strange, just another customer buying late dinner. Yet the city, already saturated with faces, begins to see hers everywhere. The investigation moves fast at first, powered by the momentum of shock. Officers canvass the streets around the store, knock on doors, check building roofs and back alleys. They trace her usual routes, ask commuters if they saw a woman in a brown coat that night, standing under a flickering street lamp, waiting for something that never came. They inspect the river that runs a few blocks away, cold water sliding under concrete bridges, black and indifferent. Divers go in. They find trash, bicycles, a rusted shopping cart, but no sign of Aki. Search dogs sniff the alleyways, pausing at lampposts, bushes, the mouth of a narrow side passage near her building, then lose the trail as if it evaporates in the open air. Press interest ignites when the first mysterious disappearance headline appears in a tabloid. Young office worker vanishes in 3-minute walk home, it screams. Cold case in the making. That phrase sticks. A case built on a gap so short and so clean, it feels almost surgical. 3 minutes of unaccounted time in a city wired with trains, cameras, clocks, schedules, tickets, receipts. A piece of the map where reality simply blinks off. The public reads the story on crowded trains, glancing at one another with quiet unease. Parents hold their daughters' hands a little tighter. Salarymen look up from their newspapers when they step onto dark platforms, feeling, for the first time, that the city might not be as safe as they once believed. Police begin to expand the radius. They review tapes from nearby buildings, banks, parking lots, anywhere with the flicker of a security monitor. In grainy black and white, the night of January 12th replays on endless loops. Cars passing, pedestrians hurrying, delivery trucks backing up, shadows stretching and shrinking under streetlights. On one tape, a figure in a brown coat crosses the corner of the frame at 9:16 p.m., umbrella closed, walking with quick, determined steps. The height matches, the posture matches, the angle suggests she is heading toward her building, then she vanishes off screen just 2 seconds before a car turns into the alley, its headlights sweeping through the rain. The license plate is blurred by the glare. The car pauses, then keeps going, no sound, no scream. Interviews follow. Coworkers describe her as quiet, punctual, kind, never late, never dramatic. No enemies, they say, no jealous ex-lovers, no shady debts, no secret nightlife. Her family paints the same picture. The reliable daughter who calls home every Sunday, who saves money, who dreams of maybe studying abroad one day, but never talks about running away. It is the very normalcy of her life that deepens the mystery, turning it from a private tragedy into a public obsession. If someone like her can vanish without a trace in the heart of Tokyo, then what does that say about the rest of them, these millions of lives ticking along the train schedule? Yet even as the investigation stretches into weeks, a strange calm settles over the official statements. There are no alerts about a serial predator, no warnings to women walking alone, no dramatic press conferences, just brief comments about ongoing inquiries, review of evidence, no indication of foul play at this time. Behind the scenes, detectives argue over the possibilities: voluntary disappearance, accident, crime. Without a body, without a witness, without a weapon, every theory floats just above the floor, never touching ground. On paper, it remains a missing persons case, a file with clipped photographs and stapled transcripts. On the streets, it becomes something else, a whispered ghost story of a 3-minute walk that never ended. As winter slowly leans into spring, the posters start to curl at the edges under the rain. New stories take over the front pages, new scandals, new accidents, new crimes. But the parents do not move on. They visit the police station weekly, sometimes daily, sitting on plastic chairs under buzzing lights, asking the same questions, hearing the same answers, watching the same weary faces. The younger sister walks the path from the station to the apartment building again and again, tracing her sister's last known steps, counting each block, each lamppost, each crack in the sidewalk. She times it. 3 minutes, 200 heartbeats. After that, only silence. In those early months, no one uses the word solved. It hangs somewhere beyond reach, like a light at the end of a tunnel that might not even be there. The phrase, Tokyo 1990 cold case, starts appearing in files, in quiet conversations between officers, in whispered frustration after long shifts that lead nowhere. A city of millions, a police force with decades of experience, and still a single young woman can step out of a convenience store and simply vanish. No ransom note, no phone call, no blood, just a gap that will widen with each passing year, swallowing evidence, witnesses, and certainty itself, until all that is left is the headline, the date, and the echo of those 3 missing minutes. The first real crack in the calm comes 10 days after the disappearance, late at night, when the phone rings at the Tanabe family home in Saitama. The father answers, voice rough with lack of sleep. On the line, a man's breathing shallow, controlled, as if he is standing very still in a very small room. No words, just air, steady and deliberate. Moshi, Moshi, the father repeats, louder. The breathing doesn't stop, it doesn't speed up, it just stays, like someone listening to him, measuring his fear. Then, a click, silence. The call lasts 43 seconds, the number is blocked. When the police trace what they can, the only thing they can say is this: it did not come from her phone. From that day, the family home becomes a command center of worry. A map of Tokyo taped to the wall, pins marking her office, her apartment, the convenience store, the station. The younger sister writes down every phone call, every rumor, every faint possibility on a lined notebook. The mother clutches Aki's childhood photo like a talisman, staring at the grainy copy the media has plastered everywhere. Detectives visit often, polite, stiff, always in pairs. They sit at the low table, bow formally, ask the same questions in slightly different ways, fishing for some buried conflict, some secret life that would make the story easier to explain. They find none. All they find is the thick, suffocating fog of a family that has lost its center and has nowhere to go to look for it. Back in Nakano, the neighborhood is changing. The convenience store becomes a silent monument, a place where people lower their voices without realizing it. Customers glance at the security camera like it is an eye that failed in its duty. The clerk who rang up her last purchase stops working the late shift. He says he needs to focus on his exams, but his hands shake when detectives ask him to replay that night yet again. A few residents start carrying small flashlights on their keychains. Women who once walked home alone at midnight now call friends to meet them at the station, a new ritual of improvised security in a city that sells itself as safe. The detectives build timelines and diagrams in a cramped incident room at the local police station. Whiteboards fill with arrows and names. They list every registered vehicle that passed through that area between 9 and 10 p.m., cross-checking with toll cameras, parking lots, company fleets. They ask traffic officers if anyone remembers a car stopping strangely, a door opening where it shouldn't. Nothing. They review hours of train station footage before and after her known movements, looking for a shadow that appears too often, a face that turns up in frame after frame. There are plenty of faces. No one repeats. Then a detail, small, almost invisible. In the elevator camera of her apartment building, timestamp 9:19 p.m., just 4 minutes after she left the store, the doors open on the ground floor. No one gets in, no one gets out. But in those 2 seconds before the doors close, one of the detectives notices something on the edge of the frame, the faint reflection of a figure in the metallic panel opposite the camera, standing just out of sight, as if pressed against the wall near the lobby entrance. A smear of dark clothing, the suggestion of a shoulder, a glimmer that might be a button or a zipper catching the fluorescent light. It might be nothing. It might be everything. They rewind, zoom, enhance. The technology of 1990 has limits. Pixels break apart into blocks, the image dissolving into a mosaic of gray. They call in a technician from headquarters, someone used to dealing with bank robbery tapes. He works late running the footage through filters, adjusting contrast, trying to squeeze something human out of the noise. After hours of effort, he prints a series of stills. In the best one, the reflection looks a little more like a person, medium height, short hair, standing still, facing the elevator doors as they close, hands not visible, no face, no clear outline, just presence. The building manager, an aging man with thinning hair and a permanent air of apology, insists no one was in the lobby at that time. He remembers watching a TV drama in his office, half asleep, the sound of rain against the window. No visitors called through the intercom. No packages arrived. The side door to the parking area was locked, he says. The detectives check. The lock is old but functional. No scratches, no tool marks, whatever that shadow is on the tape. It does not come with an easy explanation. The word intruder starts floating around the room, not written on the board yet, but sitting on the edge of everyone's thoughts. Days stretch. Rumors breed. Some say she ran away with a secret boyfriend. Some say she joined a cult. Some whisper darker things. A stalker, a sex offender, a stranger who watched her for weeks, memorizing schedules and routes before striking. In the absence of evidence, fear becomes the loudest witness. The media feeds on it, running headlines that mix fact and speculation in equal measure. 3-minute blackout in Nakano, one weekly magazine declares. Young woman swallowed by the city, another says, overlaying her smiling face on a blurred nighttime street, turning her into a symbol rather than a person. The police feel the pressure. They start checking old case files, assaults, indecent exposures, attempted kidnappings within a 10-kilometer radius over the last 5 years. A few names rise to the surface, men with previous records, some out on parole, some living alone in cramped apartments not unlike hers. One by one, they are questioned, homes searched, alibis tested. In most cases, their habits are ugly but predictable, their patterns sloppy, their crimes reckless. Nothing about any of them fits the cold precision of this disappearance. No threats before, no trophies after, no bragging, no contact. It's as if this was a crime, the perpetrator stepped out of the dark to act once and then stepped back into it, leaving no ripple. Then something happens that doesn't fit any pattern at all. A week into February, a postcard arrives at the Tanabe family home. Bright colors, a tourist shot of Tokyo Tower at night, lights glittering against a black sky. No return address, no sender's name. The message on the back is short, written in neat, almost feminine handwriting. I'm okay. Don't worry about me. Tell them to stop looking. It is signed with a single letter, A. The postmark is smeared, but the date is clear. February 10th, 1990. Almost a month after she vanished. The family's first reaction is wild hope. The mother clutches the card, tracing the ink with trembling fingers. The younger sister stares at the handwriting, trying to hear her sister's voice in it. Could this be from her? Did she leave on her own? Did the police get it all wrong? The detectives take the card away to a lab, their faces locked into neutral expressions to avoid giving false comfort. Handwriting experts compare it to samples of Aki's writing from her planner, her job application forms, old letters. The verdict comes back a few days later. Similarities, yes. But certain strokes feel off, certain curves too precise, almost like someone copying rather than writing naturally. The phrase probable imitation sneaks into the report, and with it, the hope dims again. The postcard's paper Ink and stamp reveal nothing remarkable. Cheap, mass-produced, sold at any station kiosk. The postmark only tells them it entered the system in central Tokyo, somewhere under the mesh of elevated trains and office towers. The message itself haunts everyone who reads it. If it's a fake, then someone is playing with the family's grief. If it's real, then she left willingly, without any explanation, and wants the investigation shut down. Neither is a comforting thought. The detectives add a new line to the board. Postcard, hoax, coercion, signal, and circle it in red. Whispers spread fast. She wrote to them, neighbors tell each other. Maybe she just left. Maybe it's not a crime at all. The more people repeat this version, the more it starts to sand the sharp edges off the fear. A voluntary disappearance is easier to live with than the idea of a predator lurking in the alley. The city, hungry for closure, starts to half believe it. The case slides in public perception from terrifying mystery to sad family problem. The posters stay up, but people stop reading them as carefully. Inside the investigation room, the tone is different. The detectives who have walked her route 100 times feel something wrong in their bones. They cannot prove it, but they sense it in the absence of any tangible sign of planning, in the neatness of her apartment, in the ordinary rhythm of her last day. The lead investigator, a man in his early 40s named Sato, begins to carry the case with him like an invisible weight. He studies the convenience store tape late at night after everyone has gone home, replaying the moment where she turns toward the exit, bag in hand, unaware of the black hole waiting just outside. He watches her face, searches for a flinch, a hesitation, a glance towards someone off camera. There is nothing. She simply looks tired, hungry, ready to go home. Weeks turn to months. The search grows colder. Witnesses move, forget, or convince themselves they saw nothing. Physical evidence, already fragile, degrades. Whatever trace might have been left in that alleyway has been washed away by rain, footsteps, time. The file grows thicker, but not deeper. It fills with reports, statements, and photos, but none of it connects. Each new document is like another layer of dust on top of something they can no longer see. And yet the story refuses to die. It keeps resurfacing in small ways. Talk shows bring it up when discussing safety. Crime magazines revisit it in special issues. Urban legend forums in the nascent corners of the early internet will one day latch onto the case, spinning wild theories. But that is still in the future. For now, it lives as murmurs in coffee shops and late-night bars, a cautionary tale told in lowered voices. Don't walk home alone. Don't trust empty streets. Don't assume that 3 minutes means nothing. In the Tanabe household, time splits into two tracks, the calendar everyone else lives by and the frozen January night they cannot leave. Every New Year's Eve, while the country watches the temple bells ring in another year, the family quietly counts how long she has been gone. 1 year, 3 years, 5. The father grows older quickly, shoulders stooped, hair going gray at the temples. The mother begins to talk to her daughter's photo as if she were still in the next room, just a little late, just running behind schedule. The younger sister grows up with the disappearance as her shadow, every milestone measured against the age her sister was when she vanished. Inside the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department, cases like this have a name. They call them sleeper files, cases that never close, never truly open, just lie there, waiting. Every so often, a new detective is assigned to take a look, to see if fresh eyes can spot something missed. They pull out the binders, dust motes dancing in the overhead light, flip through the pages, feel that tightening in the chest that comes with confronting failure. They ask the standard questions. They get the same answers. The file goes back to the shelf. Years pass. The early 90s fade into late 90s. The bubble bursts and Tokyo changes, the bright fever of excess replaced by a different mood, more cautious, less certain. New crimes demand attention. Gang wars, financial fraud, cults, terrorist gas attacks and subway trains. The police are stretched thin, their focus pulled toward threats that shout instead of whisper. In that new landscape, one missing office worker from 1990 looks small, almost quaint. Yet for a certain circle of officers, and for one family in Saitama, it remains a wound that never fully scabs over. What keeps the case alive is not new evidence, it is the pattern it represents, the idea that a human being can slip between the lines of a city's surveillance and structure without leaving a smear, a drop, a footprint. When other disappearances happen, because they do, in a city this size, Aki's name is sometimes spoken in briefing rooms. Let's not have another Tanabe, someone mutters, and everyone understands. She has become shorthand for a type of nightmare they are desperate not to repeat. But the story is not done with them. If it were only about one winter night in 1990, it might have stayed a local tragedy, a sad paragraph in a dusty ledger. Instead, it will twist, resurface, and warp. It will send small shocks through the police force and the public alike. It will carry them forward into new technology, new methods, new fears. And one day, decades later, someone will dare to use a word no one has dared to say out loud in connection with this case for a very long time. Solved. Time moves, but it doesn't heal this one. It just wraps it in new layers of noise. Tokyo shifts from analog to digital, from tapes to discs, from handwritten reports to databases with blinking cursors. The city's skyline hardens with new glass towers, older blocks sag under the weight of years. The streets around Nakano Station change little on the surface. New signs, new shops, the same narrow alleys, but underneath, the cold case folder with her name on it gets heavier, moving from one storage shelf to another like a ghost changing rooms in the same haunted house. By the late 90s, the Tanabe file has become a teaching tool, a cautionary example for young detectives learning how quickly a clean disappearance can eat an investigation alive. Rookie officers sit in cramped classrooms while an instructor pins her photo to a board and walks them through the timeline. Office, station, convenience store, vanished. They nod, take notes, write down the 3 minutes that define everything. Some feel a chill, others treat it like a logic puzzle. They all file out afterward, returning to their own cases, petty thefts and domestic disputes, not knowing that for one of them, this old, yellowed case file will eventually become a life's work. His name is Kento Mori. In 1999, he is 28, sharp-eyed, still naive enough to believe that every case can be solved if you just work hard enough. He sees her picture for the first time in that classroom, and something about it sticks. A face that looks like people he knows, the ordinary softness in her expression, the way her eyes seem to be looking at something just over the shoulder of whoever is holding the camera. He listens to the instructor recite the facts, hears the phrase unsolved disappearance, and feels an inexplicable spark of anger. Not at her, not at the city, at the idea that someone could erase her and walk away untouched. A year later, he is transferred into a unit that handles long-running investigations, cold files that occasionally get pulled back into the light when a new tip surfaces. The first time he's sent to the evidence archive, he walks down row after row of cardboard boxes stacked like coffins, each one labeled with case numbers and dates, shorthand for someone's worst day. When he finds the Tanabe box, Tokyo Met, 1990-01, missing person, Tanabe Akii, he pauses, hand hovering over the panel as if touching it might trigger something. Then he pulls it out, carries it to a metal table, opens the lid, and begins to read. Inside is the whole story in fragments, photocopied posters, witness statements, logs of calls, still frames from grainy CCTV, the postcard with Tokyo Tower sealed in a transparent sleeve, the report on the breathing phone call, the enlarged elevator still with the phantom reflection. The absence feels loud on every page, a hum under the text. Mori reads late into the night, long after he was supposed to go home, eyes burning under fluorescent light. Patterns start to form in his mind, not clear pictures, just angles, shadows, questions. Why that night? Why that alley? Why those 3 minutes? The early 2000s bring a new wave of technology into policing, databases that can cross-reference names, addresses, phone numbers in seconds. Primitive but growing systems that can digitize old tapes. Word spreads that fingerprints and DNA can now nail down identities with a certainty older detectives dreamed of. In homicide units across Tokyo, dusty evidence bags are reopened, swabs taken, profiles built, cold cases flicker back into motion. Headlines begin to appear. 1987 murder cracked by DNA. Old case, new science, shock confession. Families who had given up hope suddenly get phone calls that start with, "There has been a development." But when they open the Tanabe evidence box, reality hits like a dull blow. There is almost nothing to test. No blood, no weapon, no clothing recovered from a scene because officially there is no crime scene, just a last known location and an empty apartment. The alley between the convenience store and her building, once briefly sealed with tape, was never treated as a definite crime site. There was no body, no sign of violence, nothing anyone could point to and say, "Here, it happened here." Whatever microscopic traces might have clung to the walls, the pavement, the air itself, are long gone, washed away by 10 years of rain and footsteps and indifference. Still, Mori starts pushing. He orders that every page, every photograph, every report in the file be scanned and digitized, dragged out of the paper coffin and into a searchable database. He requests that the old convenience store tape be retransferred frame by frame with newer equipment. He asks technicians to stabilize the elevator footage to run it through updated software that can tease out hidden patterns in static. Colleagues roll their eyes at his intensity. It's been 10 years, they say. If there was something big there, someone would have found it. But he keeps going, because to him, the time passed is not a reason to stop. It's an accusation that they didn't do enough. This renewed effort coincides with something happening outside the station walls. The rise of online forums, message boards, early chat rooms where people gather to pick apart crimes and mysteries. A case like the Nakano 3-minute disappearance is irresistible to them. Strangers trade theories under anonymous usernames. Some repeat the postcard story, insist she left on her own. Others suggest serial killers, organ traffickers, cult abductions, wild fantasies far from the dull photocopied reality in the police files. In that noisy digital chaos, one post appears on a little-known Japanese message board that will eventually be screenshotted and delivered to Mori's desk. The post is short, written by someone claiming to have been a high school student in Nakano in 1990. They say that on the night of January 12th, they were out late, skipping cram school, walking home with their headphones on. They remember turning into the alley near the convenience store, seeing a car idling halfway down, engine running, one door slightly open. They recall a figure by the passenger side, and another shape in the back seat, a blur of movement, arms, maybe someone struggling. They insist they heard a muffled sound that might have been a shout, quickly cut off. They admit they kept walking, heart pounding, pretending they'd seen nothing. I was afraid, the post says. I never told anyone, but when I saw the case online, I thought, what if that was her? The post could be a lie, another attention seeker feeding off tragedy, but the details, street layout, the angle of the alley, a small metal pole near a vending machine that wasn't widely covered in the media, match reality too closely to ignore. The phrase "car with door open" grabs Mori by the throat. This is the missing piece he's always sensed. A vehicle, a point of interception, a way to compress those 3 minutes into something that leaves no trace on the pavement. He pushes to have the poster identified, tracked, interviewed. Tech officers dig, tracing IP logs, cross-matching usernames. It takes time, but eventually they find him. A man now in his 30s, office worker, married, living in a quiet suburb carrying a secret that has been aging like a stone in his chest. In an interview room, under the hum of a ceiling fan, he tells the story again, this time with his eyes on the table. The headphones, the car, the open door, a heavy, expensive-looking sedan, dark-colored, the faint silhouette of someone in the back seat, maybe a woman, maybe not. The hesitation in his step, the flood of fear when his brain whispered, "Don't look, don't get involved." The way he sped up, forcing himself not to run, the pounding in his ears louder than the music. He says he didn't connect it to the disappearance until years later, when he saw a map in a magazine and realized the timing, the location, the horrifying possibility. Mori asks about the license plate. The man shakes his head, apologetic. He never saw it clearly. Too dark, too fast. Memory is a treacherous thing. Under pressure, it bends, fills gaps with what it thinks should be there. But some details survive. The car had a distinctive boxy shape, the kind popular among certain executives in that era. It had a sticker on the rear window, maybe from a country club or a company. He thinks it might have started with the letter K. These fragments are thin, but they are more than the detectives had yesterday. For a cold case, even foggy light is better than none. Armed with this, Mori orders a sweep of vehicle registration records from 1990 for sedans matching the witness's description, registered in or frequently present near Nakano, with potential club stickers. It's like sifting the ocean with a tea strainer. Cars have been sold, scrapped, exported. Owners moved, died, vanished from records. Still, a list emerges, long and depressing, but finite. Among the names are executives, small business owners, a retired teacher, a company driver with 3 previous complaints of aggressive behavior toward women, none strong enough to result in a conviction. The last one catches Mori's eye. A driver whose job it was to take clients home from late-night dinners, who knew Tokyo's side streets better than most, who would have had plenty of reason to linger in an alley near a station without attracting attention. They bring him in. He's in his 50s now, rounder in the face, hair thinning, but his eyes are small and sharp. He denies everything, of course. Never heard of her. Don't remember that night. So many years, so many alleys, so many passengers. He had a car like that, sure, lots of people did. Yes, he used to smoke in it. No, he never picked up anyone against their will. He's smooth, practiced. You don't spend decades driving drunk executives around without learning how to talk your way out of discomfort. Legally, the detectives have almost nothing. The man has no violent convictions. The witness cannot put him definitively at the scene. The car is gone, scrapped years ago. The interview ends with no handcuffs, just a sour taste in everyone's mouth. The media never hears about this near suspect, this almost story. To go public with it would be irresponsible, maybe even ruinous. Without proof, naming him would turn the investigation into a witch hunt. For Mori, though, it feels like being 3 steps from the finish line and slamming into an invisible wall. He can see a version of events playing out in his mind. The sedan idling, Aki walking past, the driver calling out something harmless sounding, maybe offering a ride, maybe asking for directions. the moment when the night tilts and does not tilt back. But in law, in fact, in official reports, maybe is nothing. As the new millennium settles in, other cases leap ahead in priority. High-profile murders, organized crime, new kinds of fraud that exploit the very technology the police are still learning to use. The Tanabe file, newly digitized, joins an internal list of priority cold cases, a label that sounds meaningful but mostly means it will be looked at once or twice a year instead of once every few. The phrase Tokyo 1990 cold case becomes a cliché, a tag used in occasional think pieces about unsolved crimes, usually accompanied by the same photo of her, the same map, the same questions. For the family, the years are measured differently. The mother falls ill, her body slowly failing under the weight of stress and age. In hospital corridors, she clutches the postcard copy that the police allowed them to keep, even though experts say it was probably a cruel imitation. She doesn't care what they say. For her, those words, "I'm okay, don't worry about me," have become a prayer, a lullaby she whispers to herself when the machines beep in the night. The father visits the police less often now, his steps slower, voice weaker. The younger sister, no longer young, starts to wonder what will happen when she is the only one left remembering her sibling as anything more than a headline. Sometimes Mori thinks of walking away. The case is a maze with no exit. There is no career benefit to obsessing over a disappearance from a decade ago. His colleagues gently suggest he focus on files that can actually move. Yet every time he tries to drop it, something drags him back. A new article, a passing mention by a superior, the sight of a young woman at a station alone at night. He keeps a copy of Aki's photo in his desk, not framed, just tucked into the corner of a folder. When the job grinds him down, he takes it out, looks into those captured eyes, and reminds himself that the purpose of all this paperwork, all this procedure, is not statistics or promotions. It's people like her. And then quietly the world takes another technological leap. Digital imaging becomes sharper. Facial recognition software slithers into existence in labs and tech companies. Data storage becomes cheaper, making it possible to keep everything forever. In another corner of the city, a private security firm upgrades its archives, cleaning out old tapes, transferring what they can to hard drives. Among the reels scheduled for disposal are some labeled with dates from the late 80s and early 90s, including footage from a small bank branch 2 streets away from the Nakano convenience store. On those tapes, time-stamped 1990-01-12, there is a camera pointed not at tellers or safes, but at a side entrance facing the very alley that swallowed Aki Tanabe whole. It will take years before anyone realizes what those tapes contain, years before a line in a mundane inventory list catches the eye of someone who recognizes the date and the location. But when that happens, when those reels are pulled from a box just days away from destruction and fed into a modern machine, the night that has been replayed only in memory and speculation will flicker back to life in flickering monochrome. For the first time in decades, the city will see that alley in motion again. The rain, the headlights, the shadows. And somewhere in those frames, buried in static and darkness, will be the thing that allows someone one day to say that forbidden word out loud about the Tokyo 1990 cold case. Solved. The box is on its way to the shredder when the date catches his eye. A bored 20-something pushing a dolly through the basement of a private security firm glances at the inventory sheet, mouthing labels as he walks. Old bank, old footage, destroy by end of month. One line makes him slow. 1990-01-12, exterior entrance, Nakano branch. It means nothing clear, just a faint echo from some TV special he half-watched once. He shrugs and keeps moving. At the corner, the dolly jolts. A tape case cracks, plastic splitting with a tired snap. He swears, picks it up. The reel inside is loose, black ribbon hanging out. Policy says, broken, scheduled for destruction, straight to the grinder. His thumb rubs the white sticker anyway. 1990-01-12, Nakano. He carries it to the break room and sets it on the table while he grabs a canned coffee. An older coworker notices the label. His brother used to be a cop. Certain dates don't wash out. Nakano, huh? He says, frowning. There was that woman, the one who disappeared between the convenience store and her place. 3-minute blackout. You should show this to the boss, not mulch it. Small decision. Tiny detour. The boss, allergic to risk, calls the bank before he signs any destruction form. The bank calls legal. Legal calls the police. And somewhere in the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department, an email lands in a cold case inbox with a subject line that makes the air seem to tighten. Old CCTV, Nakano branch, 1990-01-12. Mori hears the date and is out of his chair before the sentence is finished. Officially, the case isn't his anymore. Files rotate, careers move. Unofficially, it never left him. By the time the details are confirmed, he's already in a car, jacket half on, siren off, eating traffic with his headlights. At the bank, in a small back room that smells of dust and toner, an ancient playback machine has been dragged out and coaxed into life. The tape that almost died in a shredder is fed in with careful hands. Static blinks, then an image forms, a fixed shot of a side entrance, sliver of alley, strip of wet pavement. In the corner, 1990, 0112, 2059, counting up. They fast forward. The alley breathes, empty, then populated by umbrellas, bicycles, a delivery truck backing and leaving. Rain slants through the frame, bright where it hits the street lamp's cone, black outside it. Maury's eyes stay on the timestamp, 21:14. She is still paying for onigiri and curry. 21:15. She is leaving the store. 21:18. She should be somewhere in this frame. 21:17:30. A dark shape rolls in from the left. A sedan, big-shouldered and boxy, eases up to the curb, angled toward the bank door. No headlights, windows black. The silhouette is exactly what he has seen in his mind for years. The car the old anonymous poster described idling in that alley. The driver's door opens. A man gets out. The camera is high. All they see is short hair, a dark coat, the line of his shoulders. He walks around the front, disappears under the edge of the lens, reappears at the rear passenger side. The back door opens a little. Inside is only shadow. Something shifts. It could be a bag. It could be a person. The man glances down the alley toward where the convenience store is, just out of view. The timestamp jumps, 21:18:02. The tape stutters for a breath, then sharpens. In that glitch, at the far edge of the frame, a figure crosses into view. Slim, umbrella folded, coat tight against the rain. It is more smear than person, but every nerve in Maury locks around it. He doesn't need a face. His body knows. That's her. That is Akitanabe alive, stepping into the narrow strip of world between the sedan and the bank wall. Then the car blocks her completely. For a few seconds, there is only the man's back, the open door, the blank slab of metal. No flailing limbs, no screaming mouths, just a subtle tightening of posture, a small shift of weight, like someone pivoting, like someone being pressed sideways toward a seat. The rear door closes, the man walks around, gets behind the wheel. At 21:18:47, headlights blaze on. The sedan pulls away, smooth, controlled, and exits the frame. The alley goes back to rain and concrete. The timestamp keeps counting. On paper, she ceases to exist at that point. On the screen, she has just left the only place anyone can prove she stood. The room is dead quiet. The bank manager grips the back of a chair as if he might fall. A junior clerk stares at the monitor, mouth half open. Maury rewinds, plays it again, slower, freezes the frame as the car moves off and leans so close the pixels blur. The plate is a gray smear, but not a total one. Region numbers, the curve of a hiragana, fragments floating in the noise. Not enough to read like a license, enough to start a dragnet. Back at headquarters, the tape is copied, encrypted, guarded. A small team is sealed into a windowless room with the car frozen on a loop. They measure everything that can be measured: length, height, roofline, angle of light on metal, the fuzzy badge on the grille. They compare it to catalogs of late 80s sedans. The field narrows, from generic big car to specific model range, then to 3 likely candidates. They attack the plate. The frame is enlarged until it's a mosaic. Software chews on it, spits out probability lists for each blurred character. Those combinations are fed into digitized 1990 registration records, filtered by model, color, region. On the wall, numbers scroll by in dense, hypnotic columns. Outside, it's just another workday. Inside, the past is being scraped for anything that will give. Hours later, one line hangs on the screen and refuses to go away. Dark sedan, correct make, correct model, registered in 1990 to a mid-sized logistics company a few stations from Nakano. Use, client transport, service log attached. Sale note, offloaded to a used car dealer in 1993. The plate sequence matches the algorithm's best guess almost perfectly. On a spreadsheet, it's just one row. On Maury's board, it looks like a live fuse. The company still exists, rebranded and folded into a bigger name. Its new headquarters is a glass and steel block with a lobby that smells of polish. When Maury and another detective walk in, they look like they've brought rain with them. Receptionists glance up, then quickly back down at screens. Within an hour, a handful of managers and one lawyer are sitting across from them in a conference room with bottled water and a view. Maury keeps it simple. In 1990, a car you owned appears to have stopped in an alley at the precise moment a woman on a 3-minute walk vanished. We have footage, we have registration links, we have questions, you have records. How this plays publicly depends on what you do next. The lawyer's pen stops moving. No one likes the word publicly in that context. Old HR boxes are pulled from storage, cardboard shedding dust in a side room. 4 names surface as regular drivers of that sedan in early 1990. 2 are dead. 1 left Japan years ago. The 4th lives in the suburbs, working a different job. His file includes minor disciplinary notes, late to shifts, rude remarks, a vague, unwelcome behavior toward female staff, matter resolved privately. On a faded log sheet for January 1990, a scribble almost lost in the margin. Sedan, night, Nakano, swap. The retired fleet manager is tracked down and brought in. He stares at the blown-up still of the sedan, the way it half mounts the curb, angled like a habit. "We did that," he says softly, so trucks could squeeze past. His eyes move to the timestamp, linger there. "We had a lot of late work in Nakano then. Bars, clients, last trains. I don't remember that night, but that car, that looks like ours." He remembers drivers who liked to hang around after drop-offs, who came back late with half-plausible excuses. He remembers muttered rumors he didn't want to hear, lines that sounded like boasting, like something that might explode if you touched it. When Mori says the surviving driver's name, there's a flash of recognition, then something darker, an old regret, realizing that what seemed like petty unpleasantness might have been warning smoke from a fire no one saw. Outside, the public story hasn't changed. The Tokyo 1990 case is still packaged on television as an unsolved urban legend. Office worker vanishes on 3-minute walk. Grainy footage of trains, interviews with neighbors from decades ago, pundits talking about fear, anonymity, the city that swallows people. No one knows that in a windowless room downtown, for the first time in years, the case file has fresh ink on its pages. For Mori, the sedan on the screen is both a victory and a threat. Victory, because it proves the thing he has refused to let go of. She didn't simply step out of her life. Someone took her off that street and into that car. Threat, because every clue that pulls them closer to a suspect also drags a family toward a final picture they may not be able to bear. At home, he leaves the television on for noise and stares at nothing. In his head, the alley plays in a loop. Car gliding in, door opening, a blurred figure passing, door closing, lights flaring, and then every time that blank stretch of wet concrete afterward, as if the city itself is pretending nothing happened. Even now, with a car identified and a name in his notebook, the curse that has stalked this file from day one remains. No body, no blood, no physical object that ties any one man in any courtroom to any specific act. A blurred frame of a sedan in the rain is a story. The law demands more than a story. To get it, they will have to go past paper, past polite interviews, past carefully rehearsed denials. They will have to dig into old garages and junkyards, into forgotten storage lots, into memories people have tried very hard to seal shut. Somewhere, Mori tells himself, there is one thing left from that night that time hasn't chewed to dust. A scrap of upholstery, a trace on an old tool. A sentence someone said once that someone else quietly remembered. Up in Nakano, the modern alley is bright, fitted with extra lights after years of safety campaigns. The convenience store has changed logos twice. Staff come and go. New residents move in unaware that 35 years earlier, a young woman stepping out with a plastic bag of dinner never made it to her front door. They walk the same 3 minutes without thinking about it. Down in the task force room next to Aki's photo, the board has new lines in fresh ink. The company name, the car model, the narrowed list of drivers. The word vehicle is circled so many times the paper has started to thin. The Tokyo 1990 cold case is no longer just a gap in a timeline. It has weight again, direction, friction. One more fracture, Mori thinks, staring at the still frame of the sedan stopped in the rain. Rear door open like a mouth. One more crack in the wall of years. A witness who talks. A record that surfaces. A piece of metal that has waited in the dark, and the story that has refused to end might finally lurch toward the word everyone is afraid to say. Not yet, not here, not while it's still just pixels and ink. But it's there now, hanging just out of reach, close enough that everyone in that room can feel it shaping their breath. They find the car, where all stories that people want to forget eventually go, at the edge of the city, where concrete frays into rust and weeds, in a junkyard that smells of oil and rain and resignation. The registration trail says it was sold in '93 to a dealer who flipped it, then flipped again until the paper stops and the metal keeps moving. But somewhere along the line, someone filed a deregistration with a chassis number, and that number surfaces in a log stamped with the name of a scrapyard in western Tokyo, the kind of place that swallows vehicles whole and spits them back out as anonymous metal blocks. By the time Mori and his team walk through the gate, 20-something years have passed since that sedan last rolled down Nakano's narrow alley. The owner is an old man with thick glasses and grease ground into the lines of his hands. At first, he shrugs. So many cars, so many plates, so many years. But when Maury lays the paperwork on the desk, the chassis ID, the model, the date, something in the man's face twitches. "We got that lot," he mutters, flipping through a stained ledger. "Company fleet, nice cars. Shame to crush them. Some went for parts." His finger stops on a line. The sedan is there, ink faded but legible. Next to it, a scribbled note that looks like it was written in a hurry. "Interior stripped, frame stored, pending." "Stored?" Maury pounces on the word. "Stored where?" The answer is a long walk between rows of skeletal frames, stacked like ribs against the sky, then a detour into a low corrugated shed that feels colder on the inside than outside. The old man switches on a flickering light. In the half-dark, metal hulks loom, stripped of doors, dashboards, wheels, everything valuable long gone. Numbers are chalked on their sides like toe tags. The old man squints, counts, taps. "There," he says at last, almost reluctantly. "That one didn't crush it after all. There was some trouble with the paperwork that year. Then we left it. Nobody came for it. Nobody wanted it." The chassis is a ghost of a car, a bare skeleton on blocks, but the shape is unmistakable. Big-shouldered sedan, roofline sloping just so, the same as in the old bank footage. The windows are gone. The engine bay is empty. But inside, the bones of the cabin remain. Metal floor, seat rails, fragments of lining clinging stubbornly where hands didn't bother to rip them out. Rust has eaten almost everything that moves. Time has worked its way into every crack, but not all of it, not everything. Crime scene tape goes up around a car that hasn't moved in decades. Technicians in white suits climb in with brushes and tweezers, looking like divers entering a drained shipwreck. They scrape at the seams, peel back what's left of the door lining, vacuum dust from corners no one has touched since the last nut was loosened. The air fills with the soft hiss of brushes and the quiet ticks of camera shutters. For a case built on nothing, this is suddenly a lot of something. Most of what they collect is useless. Dirt, rust, insect husks, anonymous fibers blown in by years of wind. But from the crevice where the rear seat used to bolt into the frame, a technician's gloved fingers lift something small and stubbornly out of place. A length of material, almost brittle, wedged tight as if crushed under weight and time. Under the magnifier, it looks like a fragment of fabric, pale, with a faint pattern that could be threads, could be ghosts. Bagged, labeled, logged. Then another. A short, dark hair caught in a seam where the rear door latch once sat. Too old, maybe. Too degraded, maybe. But bagged anyway. The old junkyard owner watches from a distance, arms folded. "You really think you'll get anything after all this time?" He asks no one in particular. Maury doesn't answer. He's thinking of other cases, other cars, other scraps that once looked like nothing until a lab's machine whispered something different. He knows the odds. He knows that age, heat, and neglect are poison for evidence. But he also knows that science has been quietly catching up while the case slept. The samples go into a world of white walls and calibrated machines. Analysts speak in cautious, flat voices, trained to never promise more than the data can bear. They talk about extraction challenges, degradation curves, contamination risks. They talk about partial profiles, alleles, probabilities. The investigators talk about one thing, match or no match, anything that can anchor that rusted metal skeleton to a human name. 1 week later, an email pings into Maury's inbox with the kind of subject line that makes his hands sweat. "Tanabe case, DNA analysis results." He reads it once fast, then again slowly. The fabric fragment yields almost nothing, a faint trace, too mixed, too broken, but the hair gives up more. Against expectation, there is enough intact material to pull a partial genetic profile. Not complete, not courtroom perfect, but structured, human, female. Compared against the DNA sample quietly collected from a personal item preserved from Aki's apartment, a hairbrush, kept in evidence for reasons no one could fully articulate back then. It shows shared markers, not a full match, but strong. Strong enough that the lead analyst uses words like highly consistent with and significant likelihood of. It is not the slam of a gavel. It is more like a door that has been sealed shut for 35 years, easing open a fraction of an inch. A fragment of her, trapped in the metal ribs of that car, clinging on while the rest of the story dissolved into rumor. It doesn't tell them everything. It tells them one thing. She was in that back seat. Not in theory, not in speculation. In fact, the room where Maury delivers this to his team feels smaller than usual. On the board, the still frame of the sedan is flanked by the grainy convenience store shot of her at the register in a new photo, the rusted shell in the junkyard. 3 images, 1 line, 35 years of darkness connecting them. "This is it," one detective breathes. Someone else whispers, "We've got her in the car." The words hang there, heavy and trembling. It is terrible comfort. It confirms the worst thing the family feared. It also crushes the lingering story that she might have walked away willingly and built a secret life somewhere else. The driver they circled before, middle-aged now, living quiet, no criminal record on paper, goes from person of interest to primary target without the word being said aloud. They watch his house, his work, his routes. He leaves early, returns late, drinks at the same small bar near the station on Thursdays. Neighbors describe him as normal, polite enough, keeps to himself. They always do until they don't. When Maury and his partner knock on his door the next time, they bring more than questions. They bring photos. They bring a printout of the bank camera still, the car paused, frozen mid-crime. They bring the lab's cautious language translated into blunt fact. They bring 35 years of silence. He plays confused at first. The old dance. That was a long time ago. I drove thousands of clients. How can anyone say what car that is? His eyes flick to the photos quickly, then away as if the paper burns. When they mention the junkyard chassis, the DNA, the fact that a woman who vanished in January 1990 left traces in the spine of a car he used to drive, something tightens at the corners of his mouth. You can't prove what happened, he says, a shade too fast. You can't prove anything except she sat in a car. That's nothing. People get in cars every day. It's an admission disguised as defiance, and everyone in the room feels it. Yes, they think, she did get in a car, she just never got out of it alive. Legally, he's not wrong. They have a car, and her DNA in it. They do not have footage of the act. They do not have a body. They do not have a confession. They have circumstantial chains, strong but not unbreakable, connecting a driver, a company, a route, a night. Without more, charges will be a gamble, a roll of dice with years of work piled on top. Pressure builds quietly. Above Maury, higher ranks weigh risk and reward. Take a shot now and risk a very public acquittal, or dig longer in the hope of something decisive surfacing. The media doesn't know the specifics, but rumors leak. Major break in Tokyo 1990 case, a tabloid headline teases, feeding the old hunger. Talk shows circle. Commentators rehearse takes. The phrase, cold case solved, slips back into circulation with a question mark soft enough to ignore if needed. For the Tanabe family, the news comes in a controlled burst of sentences in a small meeting room. Maury sits across from the sister, now in her 50s, hair shorter, eyes older, and explains in simple words what the lab found, what the old car means. The parents are gone now, taken by illness and time, their chairs at the table empty. The sister listens without interrupting, fingers pressed white against a cup of tea she doesn't drink. When he tells her that her sister's genetic trace was found in the rear of a company car identified in footage from that night, she exhales as if something inside her chest has snapped free after being held too long. So she didn't leave us, she says quietly, more to herself than to him. She didn't choose to go. It is a horrible comfort and a terrible relief. Grief rearranges itself inside her, not lighter, just finally facing the right direction. The city responds in its own way. People who were children when the case first flashed across TV screens now read about the new development on phones and crowded trains. The idea that a piece of metal left to rust on the edge of town could still speak for a woman lost in 1990 spreads like a strange kind of hope and a fresh kind of dread. Old fears get new detail. Suddenly, that walk home everyone takes for granted is again a line that can be cut by an idling car and a quiet door. Behind the scenes, Maury plays a longer game. If the driver won't break from direct pressure, maybe the past around him will crack. They trace old coworkers, bar acquaintances, past girlfriends, anyone who might have heard something late at night when bravado and alcohol loosened his tongue. Most remember little. Some remember too much. One former colleague recalls a night sometime in the early 90s when the driver came back late, shirt-stained, mood strange. He made a joke, ugly and vague, about women who think they can walk everywhere alone, and how some of them learn the hard way. At the time, it sounded like the usual bar talk. In hindsight, it tastes like poison. The colleague never reported it. Why would he? There was no case name attached, no missing poster in front of him as the words were spoken. Now, in an interview room decades later, he sits under the same humming light and repeats the memory word for word, voice shaking. It's not evidence, not in the way courts want. It is pattern, it is habit. It is a glimpse of a mind that might have crossed a line that night in Nakano and never fully come back. The driver starts to feel the net tighten. Surveillance becomes more visible. On purpose, questions reach his neighbors, his employer. A quiet life fractures under the weight of an old night finally catching up. He hires a lawyer. He stops going to his Thursday bar. He changes routes. He knows something the detectives don't, and that something leaks into every movement, every flinch, every angry denial. In press conferences, police spokespeople choose their words with surgical care. Significant new developments. Substantial progress. We are closer than ever. Cameras flash. The phrase Tokyo 1990 cold case returns to primetime, now paired with phrases like breakthrough and long-awaited answers. People like neat arcs, stories that close. The word solved hovers at the edge of every headline, beating like a pulse behind the text. But in the task force room, Maury is not thinking about headlines. He is thinking about a gap. The gap between we can place her in that car and we can prove how she left it. Somewhere in that gap lies the difference between a story that convinces the public and a case that survives a courtroom. Somewhere in that gap is a body that has never been found. He spreads maps across the table. Tokyo as it was in 1990, its industrial edges, its empty lots, its rivers and drainage canals, its construction sites that have since become fashionable towers. He draws circles around Nakano, radiating outward along roads that a driver in a powerful sedan could have taken that night with a panicking, struggling passenger in the back. Each circle is a field of old possibilities. Abandoned warehouses, rural edges, places where the city thins into dark. Every dot on that map is a maybe, a could have, a place where the past might have left something behind. Bones, cloth, a trace buried in soil. Officially, the missing person case has not been reclassified. Unofficially, everyone in that room has moved on from the question of whether a crime occurred. The only remaining questions are where exactly and how much of it the Earth is still willing to give back. Outside, the city's lights drown out the stars. People stream through stations and alleys, their own 3-minute walks home blending into a river of routines. Somewhere among them, the man who drove that sedan in 1990 walks too, carrying a secret he hoped time would bury. Somewhere in a quiet apartment, a sister sits at a kitchen table with a photocopy of a postcard and a lab report side by side, staring at the space between "I'm okay" and "her DNA was found in the back seat of a car." Somewhere in a junkyard on the city's edge, a rusting frame cools under night air, lighter now by one hair, one fabric thread, but heavy with the role it has finally played. The Tokyo 1990 cold case is no longer an empty headline. It has shape again. It has a car, a night, a route, a man whose name is written in thick marker on a board. It is closer than ever to the line that separates mystery from narrative, narrative from judgment. But until something breaks that last gap, a confession, a body, a single undeniable link, it remains what it has always been at its core. A question hanging in the dark, an unfinished sentence at the end of a long, narrow alley in the rain. The maps stop being lines on paper and start turning into boots in mud. The circles Maury drew around Nakano bleed outward into the suburbs, then into the fringe where Tokyo's neat grid frays into fields, drainage canals, half-finished developments. The board in the task force room sprouts pins like a bruise. Rivers, reservoirs, old construction sites, places a man in a sedan could reach in under an hour in 1990 with the city asleep and the radio low. The order goes out quietly but firmly. Reclassify the operation. This is no longer just a missing persons outreach. This is body search. This is evidence hunt. This is an old ghost being dragged by force back into the light. Local precincts get the memo. Patrol cars that once cruised past anonymous empty lots now stop and stare. Officers leaning on their doors, imagining what might lie under the waist-high grass. Retired cops get polite calls, their memories mined for tales of odd smells, disturbed soil, half-reported finds from that winter. Municipal offices cough up records of landfills, drainage works, illegal dump complaints. A 35-year-old disappearance suddenly dictates where today's budget for shovels and divers goes. News leaks. It always does. Cold case sparks massive ground search in Tokyo outskirts. A morning paper splashes, the headline riding above a photo of uniformed officers combing a wooded embankment. Tokyo 1990, police dig for answers, another one says. The old phrase dressed up as something new. Residents who moved in last year wake up to find their quiet jogging path crawling with investigators stringing tape and flags. We had no idea, they tell microphones, looking over shoulders at backhoes biting into the earth. Maury hates the cameras, but he knows they come with the territory now. He stands at the edge of a ravine while a crew sets up a tripod, feeling the grit of old dirt under his boots. In his mind, the 3 minutes in Nakano play again and again, translated into kilometers of road, into left and right turns, into choices made by a driver whose hands might have been shaking or steady, whose headlights carved these same shadows decades ago. Search teams fan out. Some work with ground-penetrating radar machines pulling ghostly images from beneath the soil. Others move in lines, side by side, eyes down, fingers probing loose dirt, hollows, cloth, bone. Dogs weave between them, harnesses tight, trained noses chasing the faintest hints of human decay, long since eroded. Most days bring nothing, just rusted cans, broken glass, the detritus every city leaves under its skin. Then one morning, On the edge of a drainage canal choked with reeds, a young officer calls out. The sound is small but cuts through chatter like a siren. He is kneeling in mud, gloved hands hovering over a patch of soil that looks, to everyone else, like any other patch of soil. To him, something is wrong with it. It's softer, it crumbles differently. When he brushes it aside, a shape emerges. Curved, off-white, not quite stone. The canal edge fills with bodies in uniforms. Tape goes up. Cameras are held back to a distance, forced into long lenses, in speculation. Technicians move in with brushes, forming a circle around a shallow depression that has not been touched in years. A fragment of bone, then another. A length of cloth, colorless with age, clinging to nothing. A small, corroded metal object that could be a clasp, a zipper pull, a button from a coat that once had a brand, a price tag, a life attached to it. Rumors outrun the lab results. Remains found in Tokyo 1990 search, the Evening News announces, pairing archival shots of Aki's face with the muddy canal, the visual grammar quietly suggesting equivalence. People watching in their apartments feel an uncomplicated emotion. Finally, for them, bone plus search equals body equals closure. For Mori, standing in the lab the next day reading preliminary reports, nothing is uncomplicated at all. The bones are human, female, adult. That much is clear. But the soil here is harsh. Years of water and chemicals have chewed at the edges. The skeleton is incomplete, jumbled, as if moved, disturbed by machines or floods before settling into its last scattered arrangement. No skull, no teeth to compare to dental records, no intact long bone to give a clean sample. The cloth is beyond fashion, a ghost of fabric that might have been anything from a skirt to a blanket. The metal clasp is generic. There is nothing yet that says Nakano, nothing that says January 1990, nothing that says Aki. DNA extraction is attempted. The analysts warn them before they begin. Don't expect miracles. The fragments that still hold anything are fragile, the genetic material shredded by time and soil. Weeks pass. Machines hum, sequences align and fall apart. In the end, what they get is partial patchy, full of holes. Enough to say, likely this person was Japanese, female, of an age range that overlaps Aki's, which is to say almost nothing that cannot already be seen with the naked eye. Media doesn't care about partials. Body believed to be that of woman in Tokyo 1990 cold case, one network proclaims. The graphic behind the anchor reading cold case solved in red, question mark barely visible. On talk shows, former inspectors nod gravely, predicting official confirmation is only a matter of time. The word solved sneaks from lower thirds into hosts' mouths, soft at first, then gaining confidence. It makes for clean segments, clean stories. Viewers like that. Inside the task force room, he writes nothing of the sort on the board. On the line labeled remains, he adds a thin notation. Female, adult, forensic correlation incomplete, case link unconfirmed. The words feel like sand in his teeth. He wants it to be her. He wants the ground to at least be honest, to say where it took her. But wanting and knowing are not the same. He has seen too many unknowns buried in riverbanks to confuse the two. The sister is called in again. This time the meeting room feels colder. Mori explains what they found at the canal, what the lab thinks, what it cannot say. She listens, eyes fixed on the table, shoulders hunched as if bracing for impact. When he tells her they cannot, with the available bone, establish a definitive genetic link to her sister, she nods once, slowly. So it might be her, she says, or it might be someone else that nobody is looking for anymore. That's correct, he answers, hating every syllable. She closes her eyes briefly. When she opens them, they are tired but clear. Then don't use her name for that, she says quietly. Not until you're sure. Don't bury someone who isn't her with my sister's story, and don't bury my sister in a place you're not sure about. In that moment, he feels a crack open between what the department wants, a tidy announcement, a press release, a sense of closure, and what justice actually looks like for the one person whose opinion should matter most. He walks back to the task force room with the echo of her words beating against his ribs. But the city doesn't wait for certainty. The Tokyo 1990 case, once an old ghost whispered about on forums, is now a daytime topic. Is fear finally over? One magazine asks above a spread featuring shots of the junkyard car, the canal, a blurred photo of the driver taken through a long lens. Commentators argue over his rights, over trial by media, over the phrase presumed innocent that suddenly tastes sour to everyone's tongue. The man himself cracks a little more every week. Surveillance notes show his steps tightening, his routes shrinking. He sleeps at odd hours. Curtains that were once half open are now sealed shut. His lawyer suggests he consider clarifying his position, a euphemism that circles around the word confession without landing on it. Behind closed doors, older relatives beg him to cooperate for the family's sake. He snarls, retreats, then shows up the next day looking like he hasn't slept at all. Mori watches him through monitors, the way he fumbles keys, the way he looks over his shoulder in empty spaces. He is not interested in making this man suffer for the sake of suffering. He is interested in one thing only, the moment when the weight of that night in 1990 becomes heavier than the fear of punishment and words start spilling in an order that matches what the evidence already whispers. At headquarters, legal advisors and prosecutors sit at long tables with copies of the file stacked in precise piles. They walk through what they have: footage, vehicle ID, DNA in the car, a pattern of comments from the past, the new remains in the canal, the timeline that shrinks the space for coincidence down to a paper-thin sliver. They talk about standards of proof, about juries, about what will stand on the stand and what will crumble under a defense attorney's questions. They know that if they move too early and lose, the word acquitted will attach itself to the Tokyo 1990 case like a stain forever. Outside these rooms, the phrase Tokyo 1990 cold case solved starts appearing without question marks in click-hungry headlines. Websites chase traffic. Social media, now a roaring ocean compared to the tiny message boards of the early internet, chews on the story, spits out theories, false facts, doctored images. Strangers argue in comment sections about what solved even means. Is it an arrest, a confession, a body, a court verdict, or just a feeling that the puzzle mostly fits? Mori moves through this noise like a swimmer under ice. He hears it muffled, distant. His world is the next lead, the next search site, the next person to be knocked on late at night and asked, back then, did he ever say something? He knows that whatever the city decides to call it, he is not done. Not until he can draw a line that starts at the convenience store door and ends somewhere other than a question mark. So he digs again, not in the ground this time, but in records. Old toll receipts, bridge logs, fuel purchases. In 1990, the systems were paper-heavy, imperfect, regional. But some bridges leading out of Tokyo had cameras even then, primitive eyes snapping black and white shots of plates to catch toll dodgers. Somewhere there might still be boxes in a municipal basement with reels of that film, unlabeled, untouched. A junior officer finds a reference in an archive index to 1990 bridge violation logs, scheduled for destruction years ago, but marked as retained for training use, and then forgotten. The boxes are dusty, piled behind newer ones. Inside, strips of film curl in plastic sleeves, each frame a frozen slice of cars entering and leaving the city 3.5 decades ago. They load them into a viewer. The room goes dark. One by one, frames slide into the light. Boxy vans, compact hatchbacks, trucks loaded with who knows what, license plates. Some sharp, some blurred by rain. Grit, imperfect focus. It feels endless, hopeless, until suddenly a familiar shape appears. Big-shouldered sedan, dark. The plate is half lit, but the parts that are visible jump out like a shout. The numbers they reconstructed from the bank footage, the ones on the deregistered chassis. Timestamp in the corner, 1990-01-12-2203. Direction, outbound. The car is leaving Tokyo, heading toward a stretch of industrial land and half-rural sprawl that, back then, was even lonelier than now. Mori's throat goes dry. Here it is. Confirmation that the sedan didn't just circle the block and drop someone off. It left the city, at a time that fits too neatly with the small, horrible timeline he has built in his head. Abduction in Nakano around 2118. Struggle and control in the enclosed space of the back seat. Then a straight shot out of Tokyo before anyone even knew a crime had happened. The map on the wall shifts again. New circles spread from the bridge like ripples. Old landfills, quarries, reservoirs that have since become parks. Pockets of land that were construction sites in 1990 and are now apartment blocks. Every one of them a possible place where a man who didn't want a body found could have made choices in the dark. The search will have to tighten. The remains at the canal might be another victim, another story, or they might be her, and the land is just refusing to fully tell. The bridge photo says only one thing clearly. The city did not keep everything that happened that night inside its borders. A piece of it drove out in a dark sedan with the rain on its roof and the radio whispering static and songs to the driver who kept his eyes on the road and his hands, maybe, too steady on the wheel. The task force room hums with a new, tense energy. Pins go into fresh maps. Teams are assigned sectors. Requests for heavy equipment go out. On the board, under vehicle route, Mori pins the bridge frame next to the bank still, creating a crude animation in his mind. Car at alley, car at bridge, car somewhere beyond, in the dark. Outside, headlines keep saying it. Tokyo 1990, cold case solved. They say it like a spell, like if they repeat it enough, reality will comply. Inside, on the ground, in mud, in archives, in the minds of people who have carried this file longer than some officers have been alive, the word sticks in their throats. They are closer. They are so close they can feel the heat of that January night through paper and screens. But solved is a heavy word. Solved means no more gaps. Solved means the questions stop. And in this case, even with a car, even with DNA, even with bones and bridges and decades of obsession, there are still questions that shift in the dark, refusing to lie still. The bridge frame doesn't scream. It whispers. One more neat timestamp on a night that's already cut into small, merciless pieces. 2118, Alley. 2203, Outbound Bridge. Between those numbers, the city goes about its business, oblivious. Trains run, TV dramas roll their credits. Somewhere a family sets the table, expecting a daughter who is already gone. Years later, in a dark office lit by a single viewer's glow, that gap becomes the spine of a new phase. It is no longer just about where she vanished, it is about where he went. The outbound route in 1990 was different from today. Fewer lights, fewer buildings, more gaps on the map where the road slid past empty lots, half-flooded pits, industrial fences that stood guard over nothing. Old planning documents show projects that never got built, sites that were dug, refilled, then repurposed. The bridge connects Tokyo to a fringe of land that used to be a patchwork of warehouses, truck depots, reclaimed marsh. If you wanted to drive to nowhere fast, that was the road you took. On the wall, the circles sprout numbers. Sector 1, old landfill site, now partially reclaimed as a park. Sector 2, former gravel pit, backfilled, topped with concrete. Sector 3, abandoned warehouse zone, some demolished, some still squatting under rusted roofs. Each sector has a history, a municipal file, a layer of bureaucracy over the layer of dirt. Maury reads them like a palimpsest, scanning for mentions of unidentified remains, illegal dumping, subsidence issues. Some lines snag his attention, threads tied to nothing, reports of bad smells, sinkholes, dogs refusing to walk in certain corners. He circles them, pins them, turns them into places to put boots and shovels. The search footprint expands again. Officers ride out in buses before dawn, lunches in plastic bags, spades and flags rattling in the hold. They move in grids through scrub and playgrounds, through the back edges of parking lots where grass grows wild, through the margins of new housing developments where manicured lawns end and raw earth begins. Residents watch from balconies, children pressed to windows, asking questions their parents can't quite answer without scaring them. Television helicopters swoop in whenever there's enough tape and uniforms to make a good aerial shot. From above, the search lines look like stitches in the city's fabric. Tokyo 1990, cold case police closing in, the captions say, as if the land itself were about to confess. Interviews with local experts multiply. Retired detectives frown at maps. Criminologists talk about offender behavior, stress the likelihood that the suspect chose a spot he knew well, somewhere quiet, somewhere he could revisit without raising suspicion. Their words sound tidy, logical. They don't match the chaos of actual soil, broken glass, old trash, roots wrapping around whatever has been left beneath. In the middle of this, the driver's world shrinks to the size of his apartment and his lawyer's office. He can't turn on a TV without seeing black sedans, blue tarps, officers in white suits combing mud. The case he's tried not to think about for 3 decades now lives in every news cycle. At the grocery store, people lower their voices when he passes. He finds notes under his windshield wipers with words like monster and we know. He stops going out in daylight. He feels watched even when he's alone. Surveillance logs record this shrinkage in neat, detached lines. Subject remained at residence all day. Subject stood at window for extended period, curtains partially open. Subject appeared agitated during phone call with attorney. The team is careful, no illegal pressure, no overt harassment, just constant quiet presence, a reminder that the past is standing outside his door and has nowhere else to go. Under that pressure, cracks show. He snaps at his lawyer. He yells at an officer during a scheduled interview, voice rising, insisting they are fabricating, twisting, persecuting. You want a story, he spits. You don't care what really happened. The room goes still. The recorder whirs. Maury watches the way his hands move as he speaks. Tight fists, then flat palms, then a compulsive smoothing of invisible wrinkles on his pants. A man trying to press the night back into a shape he can live with. What really happened? Maury asks, voice calm, too calm. He doesn't press the word really harder, but it lands that way anyway. Silence, a long exhale. Then the same old lines, dragged back out like worn props. I drove a lot then. I don't remember that night. Even if she was in my car, it doesn't mean anything. The door slammed shut again, but for a moment it had been open a crack. The tape preserves that crack, the hesitation, the way his eyes flick sideways toward the wall, as if seeing something that isn't there anymore but was, once, sitting in the back seat. Across town, in a quiet apartment, the sister moves through days that feel like static. People at work whisper the case like it's a show they're all following. Some offer sympathy, others offer theories. She hears solved too many times. You must feel relieved now that they've found her, a coworker says, then looks stricken as soon as the words are out. The sister smiles the small, brittle smile of someone who has learned to absorb blows on the fly. They haven't found her, she answers. They've found pieces of what might be her in a car she never owned. That's not the same thing. At night, she sits at the kitchen table with the lights low, the original missing flyer yellowed and curling beside a glossy magazine layout about the legendary Tokyo 1990 case finally cracking. The headline screams, the subheading speculates. In the photos, officers look determined, purposeful. The junkyard sedan looks cinematic, a rusted monster framed by dramatic captions. Her sister's face is there too, cropped, brightened, thrown onto the spread like a symbol. The article spends more words on the driver's possible psychology than on who Aki was before that night. She closes the magazine feeling like the city is stealing her sister a second time, turning her from a person into a plot device. Back in the task force room, someone finally says it out loud. If he's done this once, he might have done it before. The sentence hangs in the recycled air like a bad smell. No one wants it. No one wants the idea of other 3-minute gaps, other alleys, other families. But the patterns that snake through his old HR file, the colleague's story about the stained shirt and the ugly joke, the way he knew the dark edges of the city, all of it fits a shape they've seen too many times in other cases. They start combing through unsolved files that brush against his routes and work hours in the late 80s and early 90s. Missing women, found bodies with no matching name, assaults where the attacker fled in a car no one could describe properly. It is messy, imprecise work, pulling threads from stacks that were never meant to be linked. A few cases stand out, not because they fit perfectly, but because they don't fit anywhere else either. A university student found in a drainage ditch miles from her campus, no suspect ever identified. A hostess who vanished after leaving a club, last seen getting into a dark sedan outside a station 2 lines away from Nakano. A runaway whose body turned up in a wooded area off a road that the logistics company's drivers used frequently at night. The pattern is ugly but fuzzy. Nothing as clean as a signature. No calling cards, no repeated scripts, just women, alone, at the edges of safe places and cars in the dark. The possibility of a serial offender gets whispered between detectives and prosecutors, then leaks outward in distorted form. Soon, media is talking about Tokyo's hidden predator, attaching every unsolved disappearance between 1987 and 1993 to the driver in breathless montages. The narrative shifts from one cold case finally solved to, was this man behind dozens of unsolved crimes? The answer, as always, is that nobody knows. But not knowing doesn't sell. All this noise circles back and hits the task force where it hurts, in the timeline. If prosecutors go in arguing he's a long-term serial offender, they risk overreach, inviting defense to blow holes in the wider pattern and cast doubt on the specific. If they confine themselves to one night, one woman, one car, they might have a tighter case but a smaller story. The city, addicted now to the bigger arc, might feel cheated, but this is not about the city's feelings. It is supposed to be about one woman's ending, finally written in ink instead of ellipses. Behind closed doors, voices get louder. Some argue to strike now, arrest him, charge him with kidnapping resulting in death, maybe murder. Let the jury feel the weight of 35 years and a grieving sister in a car that still holds her trace. Others insist they need one more thing, a body conclusively matched, an object of hers found in his possession, a statement that crosses the line from vague to specific. We've all seen what happens when we leap on a cold case because the story is good, one senior prosecutor says, eyes hard. We're not here to write headlines. But outside, the headlines have already been written. They keep coming. Tokyo 1990, suspect to be arrested within days, one paper claims, without a solid source. Exclusive, former colleague says driver bragged about women. Another splashes, filling pages with secondhand quotes and blurry photos of a younger man leaning against a company car. Each piece of ink tightens the rope around any theoretical fair trial. Defense lawyers start drafting arguments now before the first charge is even filed, all of them circling around the idea of contamination, of evidence, of witnesses, of the jury pool. Mori stands in front of the whiteboard one night long after everyone has gone home, just him and the faint buzz of the building's old lights. On the board are all the pieces, the convenience store frame, the bank alley, the bridge snapshot, the junkyard chassis, the canal bones, the driver's name in thick marker, and off to one side, circled by itself, a photocopy of the postcard that once arrived at the Tanabe home. I'm okay, don't worry about me, tell them to stop looking. A. For years, that card was a taunt, a question mark, a branch in the narrative that let people believe she might have chosen to vanish. Now, against the weight of the car and the bridge and the hair in the chassis, it looks more like something else. A smokescreen, a way to create doubt, A cruel joke by someone who wanted to see if he could move not just a body, but the entire story. He stares at the handwriting, at the neatness of the letters, the way the A sits like a copy of something, not the real thing. "Did you write this?" he whispers. Not to the image of the suspect, not to the colleagues whose names are on old reports, but to the idea of that night itself. Or did someone else? Were you clever enough to send this, or was that too careful for you? The questions go nowhere, bouncing off walls, off case files, off decades. Later, he will stand in front of the sister again and tell her as gently as he can that the system is moving, that prosecutors are leaning toward charges, that regardless of whether the canal remains are ultimately declared probable or uncertain, they will argue that her sister died as a result of a crime that began in that alley at 2118 and continued in that sedan and ended somewhere beyond the bridge at 2203. He will watch her face as she processes the difference between believed to be and proved, between "we think this is what happened" and "the court has accepted this as fact." And somewhere, in a small, cramped apartment, the man at the center of all this will sit in the dark and listen to his own breathing, shallow, controlled, like the caller who once dialed a house in Saitama 10 days after a disappearance and said nothing at all for 43 seconds. He will remember a street lamp, rain, the smell of wet concrete, the weight of another person in the back seat, the way the wipers beat time between the city and the edge of it. He will hear, distantly, the murmur of the news through the wall from a neighbor's television. Tokyo 1990, cold case solved, they say. Solved, as if the story were a crossword and not something that pulsed and bled and refused to lie flat. In the task force room, morning will come again. Fresh coffee, new printouts, another sector assigned, another search grid drawn. The word solved will not appear on the board. Not yet. Not while the gap between what they can prove and what they know in their bones still yawns like an unlit alley between a convenience store and an apartment building in Nakano, where a young woman once folded her umbrella, stepped into the night, and walked straight into a story that the city is still trying and failing to tell all the way to the end. The word they've all been tiptoeing around stops hovering and lands on a printed warrant one gray morning, black ink on clean paper, ordinary letters doing something irreversible, arrest. Kidnapping resulting in death, illegal disposal of a body. The charges are precise, clinical, heavier than the air in the room where the task force gathers at dawn. No celebration, no applause. Just a long, shared look at the stack of documents, then the scrape of chairs as they stand. For 35 years, the Tokyo 1990 case has been a ghost story. Today it grows a pair of handcuffs. They move before the city is fully awake. Hall lights still dim in the suspect's apartment block. Newspapers not yet pulled in from doorsteps. The corridor smells of last night's cooking, of stale smoke and detergent. Mori is at the front of the line, expression locked, heartbeat steady in the way you learn to force it steady. The doorbell's chime sounds thin against the concrete. Inside, footsteps, a pause, the faint hiss of a chain sliding off a latch. When the door opens, the man standing there looks smaller than the figure in everyone's imagination, middle-aged, soft around the jaw, eyes swollen with lack of sleep, a t-shirt pulled on hastily, creased where he grabbed it. He doesn't ask why they're here, he's been waiting. When Mori says his name and the words, "You are under arrest in connection with the 1990 disappearance of," the man flinches at the date, not the charge. 35 years compressed into 4 digits. He doesn't resist. No struggle, no shouts. Just wrists presented more stiffly than they need to be, as if even now he wants control over the angle of the metal on his skin. Neighbors crack doors as he's led down the hallway. Faces hover in the gap, eyes wide. Someone whispers "cold case," like a curse. By noon, the news vans are too deep in front of headquarters. Microphones bloom at the barricades. "Arrest in Tokyo, 1990 cold case," the tickers crawl. A studio anchor says the word "solved" before anyone in the investigation has said it once. On screens across the city, grainy images of the suspect from years ago are paired with the shot of him being guided into a car this morning, head down, jacket over his wrists. Next to him, always, is Aki's photo, smiling in a way that feels wrong against the footage of metal doors and bowed heads. Inside the interview room, there are no cameras, just a table, a recorder, 2 detectives, 1 man, 1 lawyer sitting slightly behind. The suspect's hands are free now, but rest flat on the table, fingers splayed, as if he is bracing for impact. The first questions are routine, procedural, boxes checked in calm voices, name, address, employment, confirmation that he understands his rights. He answers automatically. Then the recorder clicks louder in Mori's ears, and the questions shift lane. "On January 12, 1990, did you drive a company sedan in Nakano between 9 p.m. and 10 p.m.? He looks at the wall, not the detectives. "I don't remember specific days from that long ago." We have footage from a bank camera showing a vehicle registered to your company in an alley near a woman's apartment at 2117. You were one of 4 people authorized to drive that car. 2 are dead. 1 has been out of the country since 1988. You remained in Tokyo, working that route. Do you still not remember? Silence stretches. His lawyer shifts slightly but says nothing. The suspect's jaw tightens, then loosens. I drove many places, he says finally. It could have been me, I can't say. It's not a denial, it's not an admission, it's a smear, a fog, the kind of answer you give when you know the net is around you and you're still probing for holes. Maury doesn't push yet. He lays out the rest calmly. The bridge frame, the deregistered chassis in the junkyard, the hair in the rear cabin that screams her DNA in precise lab language. With each new piece, the suspect's shoulders curl inward a little more, as if the weight is physical. You're trying to make a picture, he says at last, voice fraying. You've already decided what it is. You don't care if it's true. Tell us what's true, Maury replies. Right now all we have is what the car and the city say. You're the only person left who knows what happened between the alley and the bridge. For hours, nothing breaks. He tells circuits of nothing. Busy nights, drunk clients, foggy memories. The lawyer occasionally murmurs no comment, as if it's a spell. Outside, the city breathes in news updates every half hour. Suspect denies involvement. Investigators confront man with DNA evidence. Family braces for details. Inside, time goes odd, thick, measured only by the length of tape spooling silently through the machine. Confessions don't come like in movies. No sudden sob, no dramatic collapse against the table. When he finally cracks, it's a hairline fracture at first. Somewhere past midnight, when the air in the room has gone stale and exhaustion has sanded down everyone's edges, Maury slides a photocopy across the table. The missing poster, the one with Aki's face and the words last seen highlighted in fat black marker. The suspect looks at it for a long time, lips pressed together. I remember her, he says, so quietly they almost miss it. The lawyer jerks his head up. I remember her face, from the news, from everywhere. From the back seat? Maury asks. A flinch, a breath that shudders at the end. From the news, he repeats, but the sentence has already changed the room. For the first time, he has put himself and her in the same story out loud. The next crack is bigger. It comes when they show him the bridge image, the car mid-frame, rain-frozen mid-fall. That's the company's car, he says, faster than he should. Anyone could have been driving. The plates. We're on the car you drove that month, Maury cuts in. We have the log, the trip sheet, your signature. You signed for that car at 1740 on January 12, 1990, and you did not sign it back in until after 2 a.m. that night. His eyes close briefly. When he opens them, something has sunk in them, a tiredness that isn't just from the lack of sleep. It was an accident, he blurts, the wrong word at the wrong speed. The lawyer's hand snaps onto his arm. We should stop this interview, the lawyer says, voice sharp, but the door has swung. An accident, Maury repeats quietly. Tell me about this accident. The suspect's words tumble, messy, contradicting themselves, trying on narratives like clothes. He says she flagged him down near the station, that she asked for a ride because it was raining and she was tired. He says he recognized her from the convenience store, that she looked friendly, that she smiled. Already the details don't match the footage, the witness statements, the way she moved like a woman walking home on a route she knew, not a stranger trying to negotiate with a driver. He changes it. She didn't flag him. He offered. She hesitated, then agreed. She got in the back seat. The door closed. They drove. They argued. He says she insulted him, laughed at something. He says he got angry, that there was a struggle over money, over words, over nothing. He says he pushed her, that her head hit something, that she went quiet in a way he didn't mean for, that he panicked. Where? Maury asked, not buying the story, but needing its geography. Where did this happen? In the car, he says, near Nakano on the way out. Convenient, vague, safe, a story engineered in real time to sit in the space between the evidence and the worst version of himself. He admits to the least he thinks he can survive. A shove, a blow, a body that stopped moving by mistake. He refuses the word murder. He refuses intent, planning, predation. He clings to the word accident like a life ring. Where did you put her? Maury asks. You left the city. We have you on the bridge at 2203. Where did you take her? A long pause. The room hums. The lawyer advises silence. The suspect stares at the table, then at the ceiling, then at the poster with her face. When he speaks, the words come flat. I don't remember, he says. It was dark. I was driving. I just drove. I found someplace. I left her. I don't remember where. It is the safest possible confession. Enough to tether him to the crime in public's mind, not enough to lead a shovel to bones in the ground. He He is admitting to a general sin while refusing to supply the specific coordinates that would close the case in the way Maury understands closure, with a body returned, with a sister able to stand over a grave that isn't built on probability. A few hours later, under brighter lights and with a fresh team rotating in, he retracts even this. The statement about an accident, he says, was made under pressure, misinterpreted, hypothetical. He insists the investigators twisted his words, that he only meant he could imagine such a thing happening. He signs nothing. The lawyer files complaints. The confession that wasn't a confession becomes an argument in itself. Did he mean it? Did fear of consequence make him walk it back? Or was it a calculated test balloon to see how much evidence they really have? It doesn't matter for the cameras. The leak is instantaneous. By evening, a news banner screams, "Shock confession in Tokyo 1990 cold case. Suspect admits involvement," while a smaller line, easily missed, adds, "Details disputed." Talk shows chew on the accident angle, inviting outrage. He calls it an accident, one host says, voice heavy with disgust. 35 years of Matt Tick be on, and he calls it an accident. In the Tanabe sister's apartment, the TV light washes over the old missing poster on the wall. She stands in front of the screen, remote slack in her hand, listening to pundits discuss her sister's death like a plot twist in a long-running drama. Accident, murder, assault gone wrong. Theories parade across the studio floor in neat, authoritative sentences. Nobody says the one thing that actually matters to her. Where is she? The next time she sits across from Maury, his eyes carry the same question. He explains the statement, the retraction, the internal war over what weight to give it. Legally, it's complicated, he says. Culturally, it's simple. The city has decided he did this. Did he say her name? The sister asks. Maury hesitates, then answers honestly. No. Did he say where he left her? No. Then the city can decide whatever headlines it wants, she says, voice low, controlled, sharp. But as long as no one can tell me where she is, this is not solved. Not for us. He nods. It hurts because she's right, but he also knows how systems work. A man in custody, tied by evidence to a car and a night and a bridge, is as close to solved as most cold cases ever get. Prosecutors will build their case around the story that fits best, choosing between the accident narrative he floated and the deliberate crime the facts suggest. A jury will weigh the car, the hair, the bridge, the behavior. A verdict will come. The file will, at some point, be stamped with a final word, guilty or not. Headlines get bolder ahead of that future. Tokyo 1990 cold case solved by DNA and confession, one international outlet reports, dropping the nuance entirely. The phrase starts to calcify into fact in places far from Nakano's alleys and Saitama's kitchen tables. On foreign podcasts and true crime channels, they already tell the story with an ending. She got into the wrong car, he killed her, he confessed, the end. A tidy cautionary tale about the dangers of walking home alone. Back in Tokyo, in the stale air of pretrial meetings, nothing feels tidy. Prosecutors rehearse how to present the near confession without overreaching. Defense lawyers sharpen arguments about unreliable memory, suggestive questioning, societal pressure to close a notorious case. Somewhere between them lies whatever the court will decide to call the truth. For Maury, the truth is something else entirely. It is a wet street in Nakano at 2118, a dark sedan idling under a light, a young woman with an umbrella folding it as she walks toward her building. It is a set of numbers in the corner of a frame, 2203, above a bridge in the rain. It is a rusted chassis holding a single hair that refused to disintegrate. It is a sister saying, "Don't bury someone who isn't her with my sister's story." The city will move on to other horrors. Other cold cases turned hot by new science, other headlines shouting cold case solved like a spell against the unknown. But in this one, even as an arrest is made, even as a man in a gray suit stands in a courtroom flanked by guards while cameras flash outside, there is a hollow in the center of the narrative where a body should be, a place on a map that is still blank, an answer that no warrant, no confession, no verdict has yet touched. For now, they call it progress. For now, they call it breakthrough. For now, the word solved lives mostly in the mouths of those who need stories to end. Inside the people who have actually carried this case, Maury, the sister, a handful of detectives who still wake up at 3 a.m. thinking about an alleyway in 1990, the case remains what it has always been at its core, a cold, hard question pushed forward by technology and time, still waiting for the one piece of the night that refuses to come back.